everyone, is the Demons from Outer Space. It's episode 128. Bill Worcester, Zazubaar, Dylan McCandless, Super DM64, here for you, the people.
I mean, he just spit out that episode number with not even a hint of the word I'm looking for.
Reluctance, hesitance, uncertainty.
Uncertain. That's the fucking.
I gave you like 3 different variations. I was a human thesaurus there for a second, and you did not take advantage of me.
Uncertainty was the word I'm looking for. So we're off to a great start when I can't remember a word like uncertainty. But yeah, we're concluding Halloween month here on the channel. It's been
on this show anyway. We've still got other stuff we have yet to record, but we're almost done.
But the plan is, though, to post this on actual Halloween, this episode, which means this is...
Oh, was that the plan? Oh, I'm glad you reminded me of that now.
I had a feeling that I had better slip that into the conversation, or else you might forget. But yeah, that's the plan. So this is the official sort of cap on the month.
Oh,
over here at the Zazubaar channel. So
well, fuck. I had a good time. Did you have a good time?
So I did. I hope everybody's enjoyed the commentaries of the night. We had a blast doing those. I hope everybody enjoyed the 2 strictly horror themed episodes of the Sons of Sarazawa. Well, one strictly horror themed, one slightly more sort of X-Files-y and out there and weird, but both sort of related to the same sort of feeling.
People dying.
Yeah. And then
that's
tonight,
what we're about.
And then tonight we're gonna wrap things up in probably the most fitting way possible.
Indeed. In that the thing we're reviewing is named after the thing we've been celebrating. Is that what you meant?
I mean, yeah, I can't think of a better place to end.
So we are indeed discussing... we're talking about 2 movies tonight. 2 movies from a very popular franchise. And I don't think this time we did it because one thing is lacking in content to discuss. I think we just did it as kind of a... Well, we should talk about these 2 things at some point. I guess they kind of go together best. And after rewatching them, I'm really glad we did it this way. What are the things we're discussing, Dylan?
Well, we're gonna start off with John Carpenter's horror masterpiece, the classic Halloween from 1978, the movie that really launched the man's career into the stratosphere. He had a few hits before this, but Assault on Precinct 13 and
Dark Star. That wasn't really a hit.
Dark Star, not really a hit, but important to the history.
It had a beach ball in it.
Well, the story of Dark Star is part of the story of how we eventually got Alien, so it's an important.
I'm well aware.
But yeah, the thing that really put his name on the map, which is Halloween, and then we're going to talk about the sequel, obviously, Halloween 2, which he wrote, didn't direct, and which he collaborated with on the music, but
yeah, it was directed by Rick Rosenthal.
Yeah, and we'll talk about how it stacks up to the original, and how the 2 movies together tell the complete story of Halloween night 1978 in the sleepy little town of Haddonfield, Illinois. So yeah, we're talking Michael Myers tonight on the show. Super stoked about that.
Yeah, so let's start there. Michael Myers, my favorite slasher villain. How about you? How does he rank in that crowd?
Definitely.
Why? What is it? I'll tell you what it is for me if you're going to tell me what it is for you.
Sure, go ahead.
I think it's because Michael Myers straddles the line between being a person and being a somewhat supernatural kind of monster that works in a sort of gothic, creepy Halloween kind of setting. The best of all the slasher villains. Because like Freddy Krueger, he's actually supernatural. Jason, they made him actually supernatural. They all either turn out to be actually supernatural, or the subtlety of it is just really unbalanced. Michael Myers, I think, especially in these first 2 movies, that kind of ambiguity and balance between we're dealing with the real world and an actual human being and the dark side of true human nature. And yeah, but this guy's kind of a supernatural monster and how far he's been driven. I think that that's really interesting. And of all these kind of characters that go around stabbing teenagers who are having sex who probably shouldn't be, they're not always teenagers regarding the second one. I think he's the most interesting and the most intimidating and frightening, even if, I mean, these first two movies aren't particularly like, right?
Not in that sort of out loud kind of way.
No,
No,
it's more atmosphere, right?
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. But there is a couple of moments where I was like, ooh, in terms of like, I can't believe they're doing that. Like that gets to me. But we'll talk about that as we kind of discuss the different kills as they kind of naturally come up. But yeah, Michael Myers is just the most interesting balance between real person and potential supernatural monster man. And that's why I think he's the most interesting. So what do you think?
I would agree that that's what makes him really interesting. And I'm sure we can expound upon that more as we go through the films. But the other thing for me, and this is just a more visceral way of putting it, he was the only one that ever actually frightened me growing up. Like Jason, Freddy, Chucky, none of them I was ever really terrified for. But it took me a long ass time to grow the balls to actually watch the Halloween movies. Because I remember every now and then some kid would fucking show up to school in October with a Michael Myers mask, and it always used to freak me the fuck out. There was just something about it, you know?
Yeah, Michael Myers is also the only one who never really got silly or cheesy. And when he did, it wasn't to the same extent as the other characters. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, he never turns into a joke.
No, or
Well,
a parody of himself. Or at least
well,
never,
that's not
again,
exactly.
he never to the extent that it defaces him completely. And it's never for very long.
That's not exactly true. I guess he was a bit of a joke in Resurrection.
Yeah, but it was just in that, I think. Everything else, he is played completely straight as a terrifying force. And they're usually pretty consistent about his behavior. It's usually just what's going on around him that's wildly inconsistent, depending on what part of the series you're at. But in these first two, we're dealing with the same night.
Yeah.
So it's pretty consistent.
Fairly. I mean, there are small details that just come out of the fact that the second movie was made 3 years later. I mean, the mask looks slightly different, and that's kind of
Yes.
It's kind of distracting if you watch them back to back. It's also an
As I
unfortunate
did.
thing- also an unfortunate thing about the series in general. They can never get the mask straight. Like, it never looks the way it did in the first movie. I think it looks at the best in the first movie.
It's not always a problem, though. Like, yeah, obviously it looks the most iconic in the first movie. I like it in the second movie. It's iconic in a different way to me. We'll talk about Halloween 2's kind of nostalgia for me when we talk about that movie specifically. Right now, we're still kind of in overview mode. But in 4, I also like that design. After that is when it gets shaky for me.
Yeah, the only thing about 4 is it's a little too bland. Like, it doesn't have the sort of facial feature. Like, it doesn't have like the pronounced cheekbones that we associate with the Michael Myers mask. The cheekbones of William Shatner, as it turns out. It's a bit more just sort of blank, because the reason they can never get the mask straight is because they don't want to pay for the fucking
Right.
Shatner mask rights. You know, the first movie was made for $10 and a ham sandwich, and nobody gave a shit. But after that, you know, they didn't want to pay for the damn rights, and so they keep making new masks, and they can never quite nail it. The most notable example of this is in H2O. There are 4 different masks used over the course of that film, because they shot most of it with this one mask that was just awful, and everybody hated it. And then they shot the other films with, and by the end of it, you have 4 different masks that are sort of edited into this one movie, and so throughout the film, his appearance will change dramatically, but sooner or later they just got to pay for the fucking rights and
Yeah.
get it.
Well, didn't they in the Rob Zombie version? Didn't they just go, all right, we're just gonna do the mask?
I'm not sure. I haven't looked much into the production of that one, just because I like to block it out of my memory. But
There's a lot of Michael Myers to cover, though, and I think eventually we should work our way through all of it.
Yeah, probably. We
We're
probably
doing
should.
two of them tonight. We might as well, right? I've got things to say about all of it, even the stuff I haven't seen yet.
They won't. It won't always be a pleasant experience, but we can
No,
do
no,
it.
not at all. But I will always have things to say, and that's what matters about this podcasting medium that we've become enslaved to. So I think we should bear that in mind. But anyway, back to kind of concluding our overview and then getting into the original film in particular.
Yeah, yeah.
I just think that when I think about being frightened on the actual day of Halloween and the atmosphere of that day, this is the movie I think of. I watch this movie always every year on Halloween, even though I've already watched it this year. We're recording these in advance. I've seen it already for this review. I'm probably gonna watch it again on Halloween. Just because that's what I do, man. That's what it makes me feel. Because it iconically captures that little town America feel of quiet, sleepy Halloween. Little unsuspecting America. You think everything's safe, celebrating your little ghosts and goblins and dress up. But
Yeah, it must be.
in reality, there's something monstrous lurking deep inside. Something.
It must be. It must be especially like that for you, Bill, because I've been to your neighborhood. It doesn't look all that different from Haddonfield in this movie.
Yeah, maybe
You
that's
know,
why it always resonated with me and my family so much. Like, my cousins love this movie. The same cousins who I watched An American Werewolf in London with for the first time. We all love the original, like, 3 or 4 Halloweens. And because they just really capture our imaginations in terms of what might be out there, you know?
I live in an area which doesn't quite look like that. I've got a bit more of a Friday the 13th vibe going on around here. But I remember distinctly the first time I came up there for the G-Fest trip. I was looking around like this is kind of Haddonfieldy.
Right, and Haddonfield's in Illinois, ironically, since you mentioned G-Fest, which is where...
Well, the fascinating thing is the name Haddonfield actually comes from a town in New Jersey where Deborah Hill and I think one of the other people involved with the film grew up, and they took that name and put it in Illinois for whatever reason. So there's actually a bit of New Jersey in here, uh, which is interesting when you compare it back to I was talking about Friday the 13th a second ago. All of those films are set in New Jersey, so there's something about New Jersey, damn it. But yeah, it's super confusing though. It's got kind of a Neverland feel because it's supposed to be in Illinois. It's got this town name from New Jersey. There are palm trees in the background.
I didn't even notice the palm trees when I watched it this time. I remember you mentioning that the last time we talked about it. So they're hidden well, although it does definitely look like California. What jumped out to me is that the geography, quote unquote, of the town doesn't make any sense.
I don't actually remember if they filmed it in California or in Florida, but
Well, I'm sure it's different. I'm sure it's different pieces, depending on what was needed, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of the interiors are probably shot in California or somewhere where they had access to sets like that.
I'm trying to remember. Or they
You gotta
filmed.
imagine the Myers house is probably shot on location, because the exteriors and the interiors have to match in a certain way that might be difficult to pull off in a soundstage or whatever.
Well, I mean, they didn't exactly have soundstage
That's true.
budget anyway.
That's true.
Whenever Jamie Lee Curtis is interviewed about this movie, she talks about how like the costume and makeup and all those departments were all based out of like the back of a van. Like,
Right.
this is all super.
Well, I'm just wondering
But
if the exteriors and the interiors are the same place all the time. That's my only question. And if they are, that probably means that they're probably largely shot in the same town most of the time, right?
Mhm.
So I don't know. Point being, it works to create that effective atmosphere and setting. But is there anything else kind of overview-wise you want to say before we get into this thing proper?
Okay, it is California. It's Pasadena, and that's why I got confused.
The
'Cause for some reason,
whole thing was shot there,
some of it's in Pasadena, some of it's in Hollywood, apparently. But
but all in California. Interesting.
from what I can tell, yeah. That's what was throwing me off. Because for some reason, I was thinking Pasadena was in Florida, but then I thought about it, and I was like, no, that's California.
You know what's interesting about that? When I went to California, I didn't go to I mean, I drove through Hollywood, but I didn't really drive through the suburbs. Uh, but the suburbs that I was in California, they're not anything like the suburbs out here, which is what this movie reminds me of, you know?
Hmm.
So, I don't know where the hell these suburbs that they filmed are, but they must be an island of East Coast suburbs in West Coast suburbs. You know what I mean?
I seem to remember I meant to rewatch the documentary about the making of the movie before we did this, but I didn't get around to it. But I seem to remember there being a story of them having to bring in leaves, like dead leaves, and scattering them around to make it look like, Midwest in the fall,
Maybe that
Uh,
helps a lot. Maybe that attention to detail helps a lot in creating that feel.
yeah, yeah. I mean, as long as you don't look up to the top of the frame and notice those pesky palm trees, you're completely immersed
Right.
in in the illusion of where it's supposed to take place.
I definitely was this time watching it, so let's get more into detail, shall we? So, one thing that jumped out to me this time, going back to it, is that John Carpenter, particularly in directing the original film, has this effective grasp of point of view, where it's basically broken down into being told from the point of view of three different characters: Michael Myers, Laurie Strode, and Professor Loomis. And all of the stuff that's told from the perspective of Michael Myers is the stuff where he has to get like super artsy fartsy with it, because the character doesn't speak. His motives are very mysterious and somewhat ambiguous intentionally, maybe even to himself, because he's a crazy person. So it's all done very kind of abstractly. There's a motif of when we're seeing stuff from Michael's point of view, often it's people he later kills. We'll cut to like a shot from his shoulder of him viewing them, and the person doesn't see him. But if they had just turned around at that moment, they would have seen this giant man standing there. And
Yes.
I think
Or
that was one of the more effective techniques, although it makes a lot of the characters in this movie look like an idiot, but they already kind of did, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, the other wonderful thing he does is that Michael Myers will often just show up in the back of the frame, and there's no like, unless he wants to draw your attention to it, there's no music cue to announce that he's there. There's no like really hard like camera pan or anything like that. He'll just be back there, and then he'll be gone. My favorite example of this is when Loomis and it's when Loomis first finds Sheriff Brackett, and they're at the hardware store where Michael Myers broke in and stole the mask. And Brackett says, "I'll be right out. I gotta check on this." And Loomis says, "I'll be here." And Brackett walks in. We get this shot of Loomis looking around, and behind him
Yep.
is the car that Michael Myers has been driving throughout.
I noticed that too, because for a second I was like, did I hallucinate that? Was that just a 1970s shot that wasn't edited properly and lingered too long? Nope, it was totally intentional. That was Michael Myers' car.
Right, he's back there. He's back there. This has always been one of my favorite details.
Yep.
And he drives behind Loomis, and Loomis just happens to turn his head the other way right as he's going past. And if he had only turned around, he would have noticed that Michael Myers was back there.
He doesn't notice that car until way later.
I mean, and there are other examples. Somebody will be walking around their room talking on the phone, and for a moment you'll just see Michael outside the window. Just little shit like that. He just pops up in places.
He's an ever-present force. That's what's really effective. Especially in the first movie, where we know next to nothing about him or about what he's after. It's all super vague. In the first scene, I think it's pretty clear, or it kind of becomes clear as you watch, and that's what's so. The opening murder of Judith Myers, Michael Myers' older sister, is probably one of the most memorable scenes in modern horror cinema. Correct?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he practically invented like the long steady cam shot, going around the house, all from Michael's POV, no cuts, no nothing. You just go up the stairs
It's
and you
sort of like
establish.
Jaws expanded to a person.
There's never a cut until he goes back out the front door, and then we cut to his parents unmasking him.
Yeah, and
Uh,
when his parents unmask him is when I feel we really kind of figure out, oh, that's what was going on. So what we see is a figure outside of a house lurking around watching a teenage girl making out with her boyfriend. I mean, at this point, it wasn't really a cliche in slasher movies because this was one of the early ones. So,
yeah, yeah.
however, in horror movies, it's a cliche. I mean, that's been a cliche since horror novels. Two lovers chilling out and something bad happens to them. That's not new. So, then they go upstairs. They seemingly have sex, and we're seeing all this still through. We still don't really know whose point of view. And they go through the side door. They grab the knife. They go upstairs. They put on what we presume to be the clown mask. And I like that the clown mask is set up when the dumb boyfriend puts it on and hits on the girl. And then he goes upstairs, stabs the girl. He goes downstairs. At this point, we seem to be wondering, like, oh, is he jealous? Did he like the girl? Is he jealous of the boy having sex with the girl? But then he goes downstairs, sees the parents, pulls off we switch perspectives, and we see the kid's face as the parents pull off the mask, and we realize, oh, no, it's the little brother. She was supposed to be babysitting him, got distracted with her boyfriend, didn't take him trick-or-treating, and he just lost it and killed her.
Or had they already gone trick-or-treating because the mask was inside the house. Hmm.
Well, I think the impression I got from that scene is that part of the reason Michael snapped was that he felt neglected by the fact that his parents went out and his sister was busy having sex while he was just alone.
That is another interesting question.
He didn't have any candy.
That's another interesting question. Did they have sex? Because if so, it was incredibly quick.
Yeah, well, I think that was the point.
Uh,
She was completely naked. So
They
yeah,
go up-
I think he went upstairs, had a quickie with her, and then
a very quickie. I mean, Michael walks through the back
it's a
door, grabs a
teenage
knife.
boy, Dylan.
I know, but it's as if she got naked, climbed on the bed, and he just sort of did one thrust. Like he just ran across the room and and then
It's a
left.
teenage
You know what I
boy.
mean?
It's a teenage boy. That's all I'm gonna say.
It was the guy later on with PJ Souls was doing a much better job. I'll just put it that way.
Just
But,
saying, yeah, over and over again.
but yeah, it's a fantastic scene.
Without a doubt, it's super effective. Sets up that entire part of the story subtly and effectively with all the detail that you would want visually, and that's what's so cool about it.
I mean, it just sort of slowly unfolds. I mean, until she turns around from her mirror and says, "Michael," we don't even really know that it's a dude attacking her. We don't know what it is. It could have been some chick. It could have been anybody.
Well, that's when we sort of figure out, okay, little brother. That's when we sort of put that together.
Yeah.
And that's when I think the rest of the narrative kind of puts itself together, where it's like, okay, he's got a Halloween costume on. Clearly, she was supposed to be taking care of him, and he's neglected.
Because you might not have gotten the impression little boy from the shot earlier where he reaches in and grabs the knife, because that was actually the hand of an adult woman. Producer.
Yeah, I believe it.
Producer and at that time, lover of John Carpenter's Deborah Hill, who...
John Carpenter's and his many clones? Is that what that pluralization means?
No, John Carpenter's, as in she was his lover. John Carpenter's lover.
Oh, okay. All right. I see your point now.
Now that I'm done rearranging my sentences, she gets to play Michael twice in the film that I know of. There's that she plays the hand reaching out and grabbing the knife, and then one of the times that Tommy Doyle looks out the window and sees the shape across the street, it's her. Several different people get to play Michael Myers throughout the film. The most notable one, because he does it the most in the film, is Nick Castle. But pretty much anybody around at the time got to put on the mask at one point or another. Tommy Lee Wallace, the editor on the film, who later went on to direct the It miniseries that we already reviewed,
wow, that's interesting.
he got to do Michael Myers a couple times. There's another actor who plays Michael when he gets unmasked at the end of the film. I'm not sure if John ever got to put on that. I don't remember. But yeah, several different people got to do it. But Nick Castle is the one who did the most of it.
Right. But he wasn't the one who was unmasked at the end, right?
No, that's his last name's Moran. I can't remember his first name. Tony, maybe? Is it Tony Moran?
I loved that because they really did a nice job of making him just a dude, but his features were ambiguously kind of monstrous and twisted. He had like that one eye shut, and he kind of looked like he had like a bulging forehead, but he still looked like just a young guy.
Yeah,
I really liked that.
He's incredibly average looking, isn't he?
No, I think he's very distinct in the sense that he's got a couple of features that make you go kind of ugh, but otherwise, yeah, he's just kind of a normal dude. But there's a couple of things about him that make you go, ugh. Like again, he's got that bulging, closed eye. He's got these kind of teeth with lots of gaps in them.
Well, the reason the one eye is all messed up is because Laura had just stabbed him in the eye with a coat hanger.
Oh, she got him in the eye? See, that was the one thing about that shot that I wasn't crazy about, where she stabbed up with the coat hanger, was I wasn't sure where she got him.
Well, I mean, he grabbed his eye right afterwards, so, I mean...
Okay. It was dark. But that makes sense now. But anyway, see, like I said, he looks somewhat monstrous in his features. And I liked that. But anyway. Then we jump to Sam Loomis's perspective. And that's also equally effective, where it's him and the nurse driving up to the hospital. They're giving us all the exposition about what's kind of happened in between the murder and now, and they're talking about, oh, you don't want him to, it sounds like you don't want him to get better, or you don't want him to get out, and he's like, I don't. I'm just doing this as a legal formality. Nobody really understands how dangerous he is. This could go very badly. I'm worried. And then as we stay in the car and we drive up and get through the main gates, we see that a bunch of the mental patients are out walking around. The nurse says something like, since when did they let them wander around? And Loomis figures out that something has gone wrong. That's a really great moment. But like I said, POV is really effective throughout this entire movie. It's probably the most expansive when you get into, Michael Myers stalking Laurie and her friends around Haddonfield. But all the early stuff is the stuff that really jumped out to me, because I was like, oh, wow. John Carpenter can direct the fuck out of a horror movie. Not that, I hadn't forgotten that, but I was certainly reminded.
How did you feel about Hospital Gown Michael leaping up on top of the car, that whole bit? It's the last time we get to see him in the film, not in his traditional... I mean, other than the unmasking. It's the last time you get to see him in the film in anything other than the traditional Michael Myers outfit. You have the clown, you have the little boy Michael in the clown suit, and you have Hospital Gown Michael. Those are the only two variations.
I thought that was very convenient that he just decided, oh, this is the car that I'm going to jump on and use to escape. I wonder if he was waiting for Sam Loomis to come specifically so he could jump on his car and take advantage of that moment. Probably. Maybe that was the first car that had driven him. I don't know. But I was wondering for a second if that was just some random mental patient or if it was Michael Myers. But yeah, it obviously, when he slams his hand through the window, it's pretty obvious. Okay, Michael Myers is the only one in this material that's going to be doing that.
Yeah. So, well, also when he drives off in the car. That's
well,
pretty...
yeah. Well, by that point, I figured out that was the intent of the scene. But
yeah.
At first, I thought it might have just been a random mental patient, because I figured by that point Michael had already escaped. We don't know exactly what happened, do we?
No, I'd love to.
Yeah,
I'd love.
I wanted to know. That's what I wanted to know, because they make such a big deal out of it, especially it being Loomis's fault, because he was the one who arranged for this legal hearing or whatever the hell it was.
I don't think I'd want to see it in this movie because I feel like this movie is kind of very perfectly paced, and I think if you add anything to it, there's actually an example of that. If you've ever seen the TV version of Halloween, they had to go back and shoot 9 more minutes of footage because it wasn't long enough to fit the
What year was this shot? This new footage?
1980.
What did it consist of?
There's a scene where Donald Pleasance is arguing with the board because he doesn't want Michael to be.
Oh wow, they got him back. Interesting.
Yeah, most of the new footage that they shot centers around Loomis. He's arguing with the board because he doesn't want Michael to be transferred. They're of course not listening to him, and then he goes to Michael's room and has a conversation with them about like, no wait. Yeah, he talks to Michael, who's not grown up yet. This isn't in 1978, but he's clearly been in there for a while because it's not the same kid from the 1963 scene. It's somewhere in there in the middle.
Does he look like he does in 2? When there's that dream flashback to, you know who visiting him?
Yeah, I don't think it's the same kid either.
I don't think okay, interesting. You'd think they would have gotten the same kids, and that was probably being shot around the same time.
Yeah, and then there's another scene when there's another scene after Michael's broken out. Loomis is looking around his room, one of the nurses, and he scratched the word sister into the door, presumably with a knife. I don't know. It's all...
Oh, and they put that in the first movie?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I mean, this is before the second movie was even... I mean, because new footage was shot in 1980. This is before the second movie was even made. I think it was, at that time, just meant to be a reference to Judith.
Oh, okay.
Going back to Haddonfield where he had killed Judith. I mean, he digs up her body and steals the headstone, so...
He doesn't dig up her body.
There was an empty hole in the ground.
No, that was just the headstone. That was just like the little slot where the headstone went in.
Oh, okay. It was shot at such an angle that it looked like it could have been the hole, whatever. Anyway,
because I know why you would think that, because then when you see later on, he sets up that little diorama of the headstone and the body of Annie.
Yeah, but that's very clearly Nancy Loomis. That's not.
I don't know.
I don't know what
I don't know why you thought he dug up the body.
But well, no, because in that shot where he had dug up the headstone and the way it was shaking, it kind of looked like he had dug up the whole casket, but just from the angle, whatever. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so the new footage that they shot for the TV version is bullshit, and it bogs down the whole movie. Point being, you don't mess with the pacing of this movie. It's pretty perfect as is.
It is indeed pretty perfect. Like I said, this is the creme de la creme of these slasher pictures.
So I wouldn't have wanted to see Michael Myers' escape actually being in the movie. However, I would like to see it in, like, I don't know, either a tie-in novel or a
yeah. I'd love to see a novelization of maybe this movie that expands it out.
Yeah.
Something with more Loomis.
Yeah, maybe even make it a novelization of both movies since they take place on the same night. And just
I would like that.
It's one big story, and include the escape. That'd be pretty cool.
You should call the book Halloween Night 1978.
Or a comic, or hell, I'd even settle for a fan film. Point is, I would like to know how he got out exactly.
Oh, I don't want to see a fan film.
We've
seen people remake this bullshit so many times already. I don't want to see that again.
I have seen some Halloween fan films, and a lot of them are not as bad as you might think. Anyway,
because I'm sure it's an easier thing to adapt to the fan film kind of medium, but the story I feel so satisfied with as it stands in the first 2 films and some of the other sequels that I'm partial to nostalgically, that I always question when it's like, oh, we're doing a new Halloween thing. I'm like, oh god, what's it gonna be about this time? This new one that has Jamie Lee Curtis in it, and it's gonna be Danny McBride's working on it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about all that. Well, but whatever, we can talk about that some other time. But the pacing of this movie is indeed pretty perfect, even with all the teenager stuff. I didn't really feel any great sense of like, oh god, I'm so bogged down by these annoying teenagers. They feel pretty real and pretty tolerable in their behavior and in their characterizations. You believe them as teenagers that could have existed in 1978.
The only one that might verge on the annoying is PJ Soul's character, Linda.
Yes, but I think that's intentional.
I think it is too, and she doesn't cross that line for me, but I could see if she did for somebody else, I would totally get it,
The teenagers are the area where I don't think this movie will hold up for everybody. People...
Notice that I perhaps subconsciously used the word totally while describing Linda.
But yeah, no, I think the teenagers are the area of this that might not hold up for everybody now. I think Loomis, all the Michael Myers stuff...
I think they're all pretty good, though. Like, again, Linda's the only one that I could see maybe not working for some people, but, like, I really love Nancy Loomis's character, Annie. She's, like, a snarky asshole, and I love it. And then Jamie Lee Curtis is quite good, I think, as, like, the
Jamie Lee Curtis is great.
The straight-laced teenage girl with no life.
How do you feel about Linda's boyfriend?
He's in the movie for so little that I don't really have much of an opinion on him. He does make one really weird joke about ripping the little girl's clothes.
And I remember there being some kind of joke about that being sick, but that wasn't there.
Yeah, no. I think that was just
that should have been there. I think that was my subconscious desire for that to be there.
I think that was just sort of implied, He was saying something overtly weird and gross. And I think that's just supposed to be
well, good job.
I think that's just supposed to be his sense of humor, and Linda's obviously been dating him for a while, so she's sort of used to it,
Good for her.
But
anyway, yeah, I do like Annie, actually. We spend a lot of time with her in the middle, too. The one thing I wasn't crazy about is how much butter did she really spill on her that she had to get, like, completely naked? That's what she spilt on herself, right?
I think so. Just enough, obviously.
But, like, I don't know. It felt like a striptease. I thought that was weird. That's another thing that I don't think would necessarily hold up for everybody now, is that kind of... Michael Myers also has that very voyeuristic side to him. Although it doesn't feel like, oh yeah, that's hot. It feels like, oh, I'm not about that. That girl should be babysitting that little girl.
Right. Well, these slasher films always have an element of exploitation involved, and this isn't even something that this film introduced. This goes all the way back to Psycho, with Norman Bates watching...
and this is tame by today's standards.
Watching Janet Leigh through the hole in the wall,
The Sci-Fi Channel beats this out on a Saturday night.
There are, of course, other not sci-fi, fuck. There are also other slasher films that predate this. You've got your Texas Chainsaw Massacres and your Black Christmas, but this is really the one that started the big craze and set all the tropes in motion that would go to dominate the 80s and on into the 90s. But
yeah, I think the teenager trope is one of the better things here. I feel like Scream is kind of going more back to this in terms of the characterization of the teenagers. Obviously, they're less self-aware about the slasher tropes because they didn't exist yet. But just in terms of the real... how they come off as natural, kids that could really exist in the era in which the film was being made and presenting itself as existing in. I think they definitely work in the same way.
It's interesting how all those tropes that the guy lays out at that party in the first Scream are really just things that were set up in this film, and some of them very unintentionally. John Carpenter has always sort of lamented the fact that he set that sort of puritanical, if you have sex, you get murdered thing that came to dominate like Friday the 13th and other slash films of the 80s. That was not something he intended to be a subtext in this film, but it just sort of happened organically, and so now it's
Interesting. I can't. I don't even know if I guess it's not even subtextual though. I figured that was somewhat of motivation on Michael Myers' part. I
you
mean,
know he never saw it that way.
interesting.
Really, really he and we'll get into this more when we talk about the second film. He really didn't want Michael Myers to have a discernible motivation because what makes him scary, especially in this first film, is the sort of lack of understanding, the lack of motivation. We don't know why he's doing these things, you know.
But it struck me that, like, at the very least, these people are being targeted because what they're doing mirrors where he was at when he was a kid and what happened the night that he was incarcerated.
Right. Well, see, here's the thing. The ideal wasn't supposed to be, though, he kills these people because they're having sex. I think the idea was more supposed to be he kills them because they remind him of his sister.
Who
And
was having sex.
precisely. And
It's just
that's
an
why.
element of it, sure. But I think
Right.
it's an element.
Right. But it wasn't supposed to be like the whole thing. And then that's
Right.
what sort of came to dominate the genre.
Okay, I see what you're saying. That's certainly fair. But I think it's a really crucial
sort of-
element, and I think it's interesting because
It was
you think about Michael Myers as a guy that obviously hasn't had sex.
it was a byproduct, you know.
At least he doesn't
Yeah.
until 6. That's
Michael Myers has sex with a knife. That's how Michael Myers has sex.
true.
Uh,
Which I guess is also unintentional subtext. I'm sure that's another thing that John Carpenter didn't intend. But there's like that scene where he stabs very kind of sensually the boyfriend of Linda. He
that's all.
stabs
going to
him
be
all the way to the fucking wall.
That's always going to be a subtext in slasher films because that's part of real life serial killer pathology. You know, the sort of phallic importance of the knife. You know, the sort of metaphorical, and literal penetration that goes on when you murder a person through that. I mean, that's really the reason somebody chooses to murder through stabbing. It's not a very, efficient or clean method. It's because it has this other element that satisfies them psychologically.
Interesting. But leaving all that vague works really well, particularly in the first film. I would have to agree with that sentiment from both you and John Carpenter. Because again, I really like how much of a line is blurred between Michael Myers being human and not human. The big conclusion of it, where he gets shot 6 times by Loomis and still gets up, is the real kicker. But it exists throughout the entire movie. Something will happen to him that you would think would stop a normal man. And, as Dr. Loomis says, this is no man.
Right.
And all that stuff is great. Dr. Loomis himself, a protagonist on his own right. He doesn't have as much screen time as Laurie, but almost as much. I almost wish he got his own movie later on, but he never really did.
No, I mean, I've always seen him as the main protagonist of like 4, even though it's supposed to be the little girl, just because he's the only character who carries over from the first 2, and he's the one that I really enjoy following the most in that film. But yeah, he never really gets his own movie.
And I think that he's deserving of one. I think he's really good in this. What I like about him is that he just feels real. One thing that I compare to American Werewolf in London with this film is its sense of, well, these feel like real people in the way that they act and in some of their behavior. There's that one bit where him and the sheriff just starts... Oh, no, I think it might actually be in the second one, but there's some bit where he just starts smoking a cigarette with somebody and talking about bullshit.
Yeah.
And I just think that's a wonderful way to show candor and the fact that, he's somewhat crumbling under the pressure of this stressful situation.
Yeah, well, all of the characters feel that way. The only character who doesn't feel real is Michael Myers, and that plays into why he's so terrifying.
Right.
Everyone else is very grounded and real, and you believe them. I mean, there's the great scene where, Annie and Jamie Lee Curtis are just riding down the street, just casually smoking some weed, listening
Don't Fear the
Don't Fear the
Reaper.
Reaper.
Oh, that was a great scene.
Uh,
I related to
yeah,
that scene a lot.
everybody everybody feels very natural. Uh,
Yeah, and then they
Again,
drive past Annie's dad, who's the sheriff, and they have to roll down the window, and they talk to him for a minute, and then they drive off, and Laurie's just like, "Oh, he definitely smelt it," and he's like, and she's like, "Oh, he looks like that all the time. It doesn't matter."
yeah,
I thought that was great. He definitely smelt it, by the way, girls. There's no way he didn't. You guys didn't try to cover it up at all. That car would reek. Anyway, just so,
something a moment ago though.
yeah, I had a specific other place to bring us. Oh, did you have another thing you wanted to say?
I did, but I'm trying to remember it. So go ahead with your thing.
How do you feel about the child actors? I mean, not Michael Myers. We kind of talked about him already, but Tommy and Lindsay.
I thought that Tommy was actually pretty good. I would have rather he came back years later instead of having Paul Rudd. Uh, but
Oh, Paul Rudd played that character in which movie was it?
6.
Oh, I haven't seen 6 in so long. I forgot about that, and I definitely forgot that it was fucking Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd in what I believe is one of his first performances, and it's really weird, his performance in that movie.
I would imagine so.
I mean, it's a really weird movie to begin with.
That I know. It's just that I remember. I just don't remember him in it.
But his performance is particularly strange. He just has this weird way of saying his lines. His delivery it feels like he's trying to be Vincent Price, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Maybe he was trying to recapture how this kid talks, because there are some weird moments. Like when he
No,
first...
it's not. I know what you're talking about, but it's not weird in the same way.
There are some weird moments where the kid gets sentences that are too long, and he kind of struggles with the last couple words. Whenever he says boogeyman, that word is a little too much for him. Boogeyman. And the bullies, the bullies that push him over and smash his pumpkin, they can't even finish a sentence.
Yeah, I think it's just a function of being children with tiny squeaky vocal cords
and tiny
like,
squeaky attention spans.
it's like the kid in the first Child's Play who has that great line, "This is the end, friend," but he's saying it in this fucking 6-year-old boy's voice, so it comes off kind of hilarious but also awesome at the same way. Another good example is like the kid from Leprechaun who's this "fuck you, Lucky Charms" right before he shoots him in the mouth with the 4-leaf clover. I don't know, there's just one-liners and kids don't really match.
Yeah, I didn't think that worked here very much. But Tommy and Lindsay themselves were okay. Lindsay didn't really talk much, so I guess that kind of works.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I thought they were another potentially problematic thing that might not hold up. But not to any real hindrance. But is there anything else about the first movie that you think was problematic going back to it? This isn't a problem. It's another interesting thing that I really didn't remember, but noticed a lot going back to it this time. Very little blood. There's a lot more blood in 2. And I think that's cool. I think that it still creates this super visceral, real feeling of danger and death without that. Because there is a lot of death regardless. There's a lot of corpses, but there isn't a lot of hardcore gore. I think that's also why I've always been a fan of this series above all the other slasher series, is because it doesn't rely on gore to create those scares. There's some really intense stuff, like especially with like, he'll stab somebody in a certain way or in a way that just kind of surprises you and takes you in the moment. So that really works.
It leaves much more of that to your imagination.
Yeah, I think that works out super well, especially in the first one where there's a lot of shadows and it's super minimalistic, and they probably didn't have the budget for gore. Like I said, there's more blood in 2, and even then, it's still super minimalistic.
The only times I can really think of in the first film where you see blood is when he's stabbing Judith. There's a little bit of blood there.
Yeah, that's probably
When
some of the more graphic elements.
we see the dead body of the mechanic who he stole the coveralls from, he's got a little blood on him. Can't think of much else though, because
I mean,
well,
when
the guy,
Lori gets stabbed in the arm, you see a little bit of blood there.
yeah, because I mean that guy is the only other person who gets killed by stabbing. Nancy Loomis and PJ Souls are both strangled.
Right.
Um,
So there's
so
zero blood there. And I think I found
and
Nancy.
the second film having blood is a direct response to the slasher films that had come out after the first one, copying on the success of Halloween, because they had all upped the gore factor, and it was felt that audiences wouldn't respond as well to less blood at that time. So that's why there's more blood and gore in the second Halloween film.
But again,
Uh,
even then, it's not as much, but it's definitely noticeable. We'll
yeah,
get there though. We're gonna get there in a few minutes.
yes, sir.
This is a problematic element I just thought of though. I think the weakest kill is actually Nancy's kill. The choreography of it is a little weak. It seems like
Mhm.
Michael
I
Myers
don't, I
kind of struggles to get his hands on her.
don't know. I've always really liked that scene because it kind of comes out of nowhere. You don't expect him to be in that back seat
Oh no,
unless
definitely. I mean, that establishes a long-standing horror trope.
uh,
Always be sure to check your back seat when you get in your car.
unless like me, you've seen the film 100 times, he's in the back seat. But like I remember first time watching the movie, that really because a lot of times horror movies will fuck it up though. They'll choreograph it. They'll make you. They'll do something to tip their hand and let you know, oh shit, he's in the back seat because they want you to have that here it comes feeling. But no, this movie just comes out of nowhere and blitzes you with it.
It's the opposite of the Alfred Hitchcock approach, where it's like, oh, you got to set up the danger. No, it just takes you by surprise. I agree with you there.
They do.
It's just once he tries to grab her, it's a little awkward. It's a low budget movie, so the choreography is probably super thrown together in the moment.
See, I always liked that too, that he doesn't just grab her neck, and I like that there's a struggle there. It feels like he's having a little bit of difficulty strangling her because it makes it feel more real and visceral and frankly violent.
He seems hesitant. That's what bothered me, and it seems like an actor trying not to hurt an actress. That's the only thing that bugged me about it. I just think the choreography was showing its low budget limitations there. That's the only time I felt that way in the whole movie. So I think another take, John. But hey, who am I to criticize? Because when he actually gets his hands around her, and there's that shot where he strangles her, and she kind of gasps her last breath, and she collapses, and you see it through the foggy window. That's great.
Yeah, that all looks really good. He uses all the techniques at his disposal in this film too. You were talking about the sort of Hitchcock thing of building suspense by letting the audience know something that the character doesn't know. He does that sometimes in the movie. Other times he'll have something that just jumps out of nowhere, like that kill we were just discussing. He doesn't limit himself to one sort of trick to scare you or to make you feel tense. He uses them all, and in doing so, he creates this huge sort of tapestry of just horrific moments.
There are some things that he overuses, though, that make the character seem a little dumb. Laurie thinking Michael was dead, looking away, and then him getting up and getting the jump on her because she looked away. That happens twice, and the second time I was like, Laurie, come on. Like, you're staying here so that way you'll be with the body when the cops arrive, so at least keep an eye on it. After I think she stabs him with his knife in like the chest or whatever. And she sends the kids to go get the cops, and she like turns away and sits in the doorway. I get that she's traumatized and all the emotional bullshit, but come on, keep an eye on him, because you already saw that when she thought he was dead, he got up. So keep a fucking eye on him.
But the first time she had just sort of stabbed him in the neck with a knitting needle. So when he popped up and wasn't dead after that, it's kind of, you can imagine somebody living through that. The second time, she had stabbed him in the gut. Should be on the ground bleeding out. She has no idea that he at this time that he's this supernatural being, and this is only the second time this has happened. You know what I mean? It's like from her perspective. Okay, so he survived being stabbed in the neck with a knitting needle. No big deal. Anybody could survive that as long as they weren't stabbed in the right place. As long as you didn't get like one of your major arteries cut, you could probably survive that. But, getting stabbed in the gut and bleeding out, he should be lying on the ground, either writhing in pain or passed out from the pain and just dying. I can understand why she would think for sure, oh, it's done now, it's over. And that's why when he gets up again and Loomis has to come in to save her, that's when she has that moment of realization. And she says, it was the boogeyman.
Yeah, no, I totally think all that works, but at the same time, she stays there with the body seemingly because somebody should, so that way, God forbid he does get up and leave, she'll be there. So the fact that she stays turned away the whole time, I thought was super distracting. And just a super coincidence, and because we'd seen that throughout the entire movie, people just not turning around at the right moment to see him. It just bothered me in that one instance, though, because he already did that earlier. So, I don't know. Keep an eye on him.
The only one that ever gets me is when she throws down the knife. I'm like, no, don't throw down the knife. Keep the knife.
Yep, that bugged me too. I did overall, though, and this is something that carries over into the sequel, too, so we can continue to talk about it there. I like
That's another one of those just classic horror tropes, though, that predate, even these slasher films, going all the way back to your frickin' Universal movies. Sometimes your main character just has to do something really stupid.
Oftentimes, people are just dumb. That's the lesson, right?
In order for the monster to gain the upper hand and surprise them. Sometimes they have to do something so mind-numbingly dumb. This is where the old stereotype of, don't go in there comes from, because people in the audience get frustrated, with these.
I think you just have to play it right, though, and oftentimes in this movie it's played really well, because I was about to say I really like the kind of complacency that's overtaken the entire human population in this entire film that allows somebody like Michael Myers to take advantage of it and wreak absolute havoc and run rampant in any way he sees fit. So I really like it in that sense. But there's just a couple of moments where later on I feel like people should be wising up to bullshit, and they're not. But overall, I really liked that sense of everybody thinks that everything is fine because it's Halloween in America in the late 70s. What could go wrong?
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated that mentality. We're still there, so if somebody like Michael Myers shows up today when this is being posted, good luck.
Oh, even more so, because people go around dressed like Michael Myers every Halloween. You wouldn't think twice about it.
Yeah, and they kind of play with that in too, which is odd. I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, that doesn't work at all.
We'll talk. We'll talk about that. We're gonna get there in a few minutes. I guess to segue to begin a segue then. What else do you want to say about the original Halloween?
God, one struggles when reviewing a masterpiece to find things to say without just repeating how great it is constantly. Have we talked about the fucking score and how?
I was thinking about the soundtrack. We haven't discussed that a whole lot. So yeah, why don't we kind of wrap up on that?
John Carpenter, for those of you who don't know, does his own music in many of his films. This started out being a necessity because he was working on a very limited budget and he had some musical talent. So why hire a guy? And it's sort of become, even in later years when he sort of had a little bit more money to play with, he would still usually do his own music because he just enjoys doing it. To me, he's as good a composer as he is a director, and this is a wonderful example of it. Other good examples being like, They Live, which has a great soundtrack, but the Halloween, the music is so perfect in that so much of the atmosphere and the tension and the build and the pacing comes from the music,
It's a super deliberately paced movie, and the music makes it deliberately paced and not super boring, slow paced.
You have a scene where a character is walking down a street, on a fall day. There's nothing scary happening. They're not building to a jump scare. Michael Myers isn't going to pop out and stab them anytime soon. But the music creates a sense of dread, even though all you're watching is Laurie walking down a street, there's a constant sense of dread. There's a constant, just sort of thick atmosphere laid all throughout the film by this score, so that when something scary does happen, it has like even more of a punch because you've been so wound up waiting for it. You know, I think maybe the first example of this is when she drops off the key at the Myers house, and you just see his head appear in the frame, looking out the door at her. It's like this entire time you've just been walking around with her, you know, and then and Tommy, the kid. They've just been walking around. Nothing scary's been happening, but the music has been sort of, you know, off-putting and eerie and unsettling. And then it happens, and then it's fucking show-stopping. You know, and he does this again and again and again. There are so many great moments in this movie where, I mean, it's just perfect. It's got that same quality as like Jaws. You know, when you hear the John Williams music and you know that the shark is coming up on them. You know, the dun 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 dun. It's like that, but less overtly dramatic. You know, it's much more low key music. It's much more about atmospherics as opposed to here. There's a thing coming at you right this second, but it has a similar effect, I think. You know, and you know, there's a lot of ways that we could compare this movie to Jaws. I don't know if John Carpenter's ever come out and said this, but I think there's tons of inspiration from Jaws in this movie.
Yeah.
To the point where, you know, not only is Michael Myers characterized like a shark, but there's even lines and things about the plot in this movie that mirror Jaws. You know, Donald Pleasance isn't believed about Michael Myers in much the same way that the sheriff in Jaws keeps getting shrugged off by the mayor.
Although the sheriff in this movie takes Loomis on his word a lot more than any of the officials in Jaws.
Yeah, no, the more direct allegory to the mayor from Jaws in this film are the other people at the mental institution.
Yeah, I was about to say.
Who don't take Michael Myers seriously enough. Interestingly enough, though, Loomis is kind of a mixture of both the sheriff from Jaws, but also Quint, because there is a line in this movie.
And kind of Hooper.
There is a line in this movie that is practically ripped straight out of Jaws, and it's one of the more iconic lines, no matter which movie you're watching. In Jaws, Quint says, he talks about the shark's eyes. He says they have black eyes, like a doll's eyes. And in this movie, a very similar line, Loomis says, you know, he had the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. You know, it's almost the same line. You know, the metaphor is different. But there have been times where I've gotten the lines mixed up, like which line came from which movie again? You know, because they're so similar, and it evokes that same.
Yeah, there's a lot of lines in this movie that I can't remember if they come from this movie or two. There's a lot of stuff that's in two that I'm like, oh, that doesn't come from the first one. Fuck.
Yeah, it's very Jawsy in that way, but
you know, I think the score definitely goes a long way in making this not just another movie about a guy going around stabbing people, and making this Halloween, you know, the story of Michael Myers, and giving Michael Myers a distinct personality. I mean, how iconic is his theme? Right,
and it's so its own thing, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
It doesn't sound like any other horror theme before. The only one that I can kind of get a little bit of a similarity to is the main Michael Myers theme. You know, the do 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 do.
I know what the Michael Myers theme is.
It sounds kind of vaguely similar to like the theme from The Exorcist, in that the theme from The Exorcist is also just sort of, you know, a very specific combination of like notes on a piano, you know, that are in repetition.
Yeah, I always thought they were kind of analogous.
But other than that, it doesn't sound like anything that had come before. It's its own thing, you know, and it doesn't copy off anybody else, you know. So much of you know, to point to the other big slasher franchise of the time, so much of Friday the 13th music is lifted straight out of Psycho. Like the main musical sting that they use whenever a killing takes place is pretty much just the same as when Janet Leigh gets stabbed in the shower. It's just a bunch of violin strings going, da, da, da. Like it's the same thing, you know. But Halloween, by contrast, is much more original.
I think that it is one of the many elements of this film that goes into making it the creme de la creme of horror of this period, and of the slasher genre in general, as we've been saying. But I just think that every element of it goes into that. The other trope that I don't know if this really started it, but the final girl idea, where the last surviving protagonist of a horror film must be a girl who has to overcome the overwhelming force, because that is the, because back then that was the idea of abject terror. So
Again, this didn't really start that. Like, I know, for example,
no,
that Texas Chainsaw Massacre has the final girl. That's 74, I want to say. But
I think this is my favorite example of it, because I really like Laurie, and I really like her characterization of being super brainy, super kind of in her own head, and somewhat withdrawn, and her perspective on Halloween and on childhood and burgeoning adulthood is somewhat skewered, because she's somewhat dissatisfied with her own experience of what she left behind in childhood and what she's coming to find adulthood means, and some of the hardships there, like your friend telling the guy you think is hot that you think he's hot, and basically ruining any odds you have of cultivating a real relationship with them. So stuff like that I think worked really well with her. And just again, I think you're hard pressed, in my opinion, to point to an element of all the slasher stuff and all the horror stuff that this film does poorly. Because again, I think it's the creme de la creme, and I think that's why I like it so much.
yeah,
There's a few things that I just simply think don't necessarily hold up super well, but I think that depends on your perspective, and I don't think they in any way hinder it, really.
To go back to that point about the final girl, the reason that everybody always says that this, is the start of the slasher genre, even though there were slasher films predating it, it isn't that it created any of these tropes. I think all of these tropes have been used before. The only one that it might have started was the killer who's not quite human and somewhat supernatural. I don't know if that had been a thing before, but most of the tropes in this had been used before. The thing that it did was standardize them. It took all these tropes,
Because it did them really well.
it took all these tropes and put them into a formula, which every slasher movie from then until they started trying to reinvent the wheel in the 90s used that same formula. And it wasn't trying to do that. It just sort of happened that way, but that's why this is sort of considered the start of the genre. This to me has always been the daddy of all those slasher films, and Psycho is the granddaddy, and there were a couple of uncles before,
Right.
So yeah.
Like I said, though, I think that this popularized all of them because it just did them the best. But overall, I think that's just the MO with this whole movie. Wouldn't you agree?
Mm-hmm. Certainly.
So what else would you like to say about the original Halloween from 1978?
Is there anything else to say? Let's see.
I don't think so. Because...
Oh.
What?
There is that great scene where Dr. Loomis and the sheriff find the dog in the house, but they don't show the dog.
The one that Michael was eating. Yeah, I also like that they don't show it, because that would have been too much gore and they didn't have the budget for it.
Right, but it actually becomes even more effective because it causes you to imagine the sort of mangled state that it's in.
Yeah, definitely. That's more effective.
Yeah. Which, by the way, running theme, Michael Myers kills a lot of dogs all throughout this series.
He does that. He does it again in this movie. He does that to Lindsay's dog. I don't think he does it in 2. But
No, I don't think he ever comes into contact with the dog in 2.
No.
But it
definitely happens in some of the subsequent films. That I remember.
Yeah, he has killed several dogs. Even in the remake movies, they got that right. He kills at least one dog that I can remember.
He's a cat person. What can you say?
Definitely.
uh, but yeah, no, this movie is an absolute pillar of modern chillers, thrillers, all of the different stuff that makes you go ooh, nah, all the Jeff Goldblum reactions. Halloween from 1978 makes you feel. But Dylan, big question. The sequel is intended to take place on the same night and basically continue the story directly and largely capture the same feel and be just as successful at being the pillar of horror cinema as the original. Do you think that it is in any way as successful as its original predecessor?
Yes and no. I think it's successful in feeling like it takes place on the same night. I think they managed to make that work, even though it was filmed 3 years later. Where it doesn't succeed is in living up to the overall quality of the first film.
What do you think didn't hold up about it as well?
Well, there are several things. I don't think that the pacing is as pitch perfect as it was in the first film. The music is certainly not as effective because it's the synthesized version than Carpenter and Alan Howarth, who went on to do the music for pretty much the rest of the series, if I'm remembering correctly. That they did together. It's not as good as it was in the first film.
I like it a lot, though. Still.
Well, I like half of it. Okay, so I don't like the synthesized version of the do 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 do. But what I do like is that the background notes, the sort of dun dun dun. I like that it was done with this sort of church organ thing. It's very gothic sounding and kind of creepy. So I like that part of it, but I don't like the synthesizers.
I don't know. I don't mind it. I enjoy it. I like the opening part of it. The stuff that they use in the stock footage from the first film at the beginning. The dun 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 dun. I like all that. I enjoy it. I like that it's different. I feel like if they just used the same thing, it would feel too much like exactly the same movie again. Which in some ways it somewhat is, but in some ways that's somewhat appropriate and. The change in setting and scope helps that. I don't know. I personally, I found myself surprised by how well 2 held up. I do definitely agree that it's not as good as the first film because it came out post a bunch of other films in this genre. And it's trying to live up to the reputation that Halloween had afterwards because it spawned a bunch of successors and it felt like it had to outdo them all. But I do appreciate the expanding in scope. I like that the hysteria around Michael Myers and the idea of this escaped mental patient and the kind of conspiracy around this guy who used to live in this town returning to it to kill people like he did in the past. I like all that.
That was interesting because in the first film, he's sort of moving around in secret. Nobody knows that he's killing people. But by the time the second movie happens, the cat's out of the bag. And we actually start to see a little bit of rioting going on in the town.
Yeah, they go to the Myers house and they start chucking rocks. I like all that.
But
yeah, no, I really enjoyed that element of it.
One thing they certainly did was expand the body count. I mean, only 5 people die in the first Halloween film. 5 people. Only 3 of them actually on Halloween night.
That's another thing that I like about 2 is that it just gets into it. He just starts killing people from the onset.
2, I don't remember exactly how many he kills, but I'm sure it's at least 10. I think it's at least 10.
They say the body count at some point, and yeah, it's somewhere near there. And it includes everybody he killed in the first movie because it happened on the same night. It probably doesn't include the people he killed prior, but whatever.
I did the movie counting, and I was including the ones that he killed in the first movie because I wanted to know how many people he killed over the course of both films. And
it's somewhere around there, but
I think I wound up counting like once you add Loomis and Michael himself into the mix, somewhere around like 15.
Hey, listen, he definitely succeeded at what he set out to do in terms of spilling more blood than he had the first time. what I also think this film succeeds at is making Michael a presence throughout the film, just as the first film did. I think the directing of him stalking around is just as good as it was in the first movie. Maybe not as good, but it definitely still captures that same feel. I like that because it has to be set on the same night. Well, it doesn't have to be, but because they decided to set it on the same night as the first film, it all takes place at night, and that's interesting and effectively moody for Halloween, isn't it? That it all takes place at night. It all takes place in these twilight hours of the morning. Did you like that? I love that.
The fact that it's all at night, is that the question? Or are you asking if I like the idea that it takes place on the same night as the first film?
I mean, I guess both, but I just liked that we got a Halloween movie that's all set at night in the twilight hours of the morning where everything is at its quietest. I really liked the setting of the hospital in that way. It almost felt abandoned.
Yeah, and that's a little bit of a logical question. Is Lori the only patient in this hospital?
That was weird. They seem to half explain it at the beginning where that's not the main hospital in the area. It's like just a clinic, and it's somewhat kind of half open, half not. I don't know what's going on there because the maternity clinic seems to be fully operational.
I mean, they certainly don't have that many people on staff. Because I was just talking about how Michael killed at least 10 people in this movie, and that's a big step up from the last movie. But when you consider how many people there should be in a fully functioning hospital, it's actually kind of lacking. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely wondered about that because I've been to hospitals this late at night, if not later, and they are certainly busier in my neck of the woods. So I wondered about that as well. But I liked
even if they're short-staffed, there should be more patients. Even though they're in this small town in Illinois, there should be more than one patient at the hospital at any one given time. It's
well, like
weird.
I said, there's babies in the hospital, so we know that there's more than there. She's not the only one, but it definitely seemed like there was something going on,
especially on Halloween when people are going out and doing stupid pranks and getting injured in any number of ways. Like there should be people coming.
That boy gets sent there with the blade in his mouth.
That's true.
Was the idea there that he had that he ate an apple with a razor blade in it?
It might have been. I don't know. Apparently,
there has never been an actual reported case of.
Yeah, it's actually an urban myth. It doesn't really happen.
No.
Who gives out apples on Halloween? I mean, I'd be suspicious of that guy anyway.
But exactly. But dudes don't get shot 6 times and get up, do they? So I guess it's okay.
No, not typically.
But regardless of the logical quandaries, I enjoyed the setting in that way. I thought that it led to some creepy atmosphere. Although the complacency and idiocy of the general populace becomes more problematic in this film after Michael Myers has been on the loose. You'd think they'd be more on edge. But security guards never looking at TV monitors allows Michael Myers to get away with a lot in this film, doesn't it?
It does.
So that's potentially problematic. I didn't find myself really minding, though.
The thing that they really managed to do pretty well, though, is make you feel that it's taking place on the same night.
Without question, it's flawless in that way.
The only way that fails is that Jamie Lee's hair was different than it was in the first movie, and so she wears a wig in this movie, and you can kind of tell, and her hair doesn't look the same. But
I didn't notice.
Other than that, it feels pretty seamless. I mean, they even went so far as to have Nancy Loomis come back in just to play her own corpse for like 5 seconds.
That was a really good scene. Would you agree?
That was a great scene, and it really helped sell that. Also,
I like the transition too from Sheriff Brackett to the other blonde guy because Sheriff Brackett couldn't continue because he just found out that his daughter was murdered.
I have to wonder if for some reason they just couldn't have that actor for very long, and that's why they sort of wrote him out of the sequel and had a different cop.
Yeah, you might expect him to show up later trying to kill Michael, or maybe actually going out for revenge against Loomis, maybe, and maybe he gets killed or something. Yeah, I kind of wondered about that myself, but It felt natural enough given how it was written, so I didn't really mind.
well, after that scene where he sees his dead daughter, I would I would expect him to do one of two things. Either he does exactly what he does, go home, or he gets even more determined to find Michael, and him and Loomis storm off together, and now he has the same level of commitment to it as Loomis does. Either one would have made for an interesting movie. Either one of them
Or
would
he
have been...
gets mad at Loomis and goes out for revenge against him. Maybe he blames him more than he even blames Myers.
He kind of does, actually, in this movie. All of these things would make for interesting sequel ideas. All of them would have been believable. And so I have to wonder if they just didn't have that actor for very long, and that's why they went with, here's the new cop who's going to be covering the rest of it. But how nice of Nancy to come back just to play her own corpse. She's a real trooper, and it must be a favorite of John Carpenter's, because she pops up again in The Fog, and has a very small appearance in Halloween 3: Season of the Witch.
Oh, interesting. I also liked that the nurse from the beginning of the first movie comes back to come collect Loomis. That's also great.
Was she supposed to be the nurse? I thought she was supposed to be another psychiatrist or another member of the board.
I thought that she was supposed to be the same.
Because she's not wearing a She's not wearing. She doesn't look like the same woman.
I thought she was the same woman. I could be wrong, but she's
not
wearing.
Even,
I thought
she's not even wearing no nurse's clothes, and that bitch was still wearing that outfit 20 years later in H2O. So.
Oh, was that supposed to be the same woman?
Yeah, that nurse that gets killed at the beginning of H2O is the same nurse from Halloween 1. Same actress and everything.
Okay, so maybe I'm wrong then. I'm probably wrong. Oh well. Other bits of good continuity. Some names. There was the name Tremor popped up. That was a name from the first movie.
Tramer. Ben Tramer, is that who you're talking about?
Whatever the name was. But there was a character who was in this movie, or he was mentioned, and was also mentioned in the first one, that was as being Laurie's crush.
Yeah, and now he's fucking dead in the most insane way possible.
How did he die? When did he die?
He's the one that gets hit by the car and explodes.
Oh, that was Ben Tramer?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you want to talk about that then? That was wild.
I never got over that.
So what you seem to really hate it. I just thought it was hysterical. It takes up potentially too much of the runtime, but
it is hysterical, and that's why it doesn't work. It doesn't fit.
No, it doesn't.
Into this movie.
I didn't mind it though. It felt somewhat outrageous and morbid in a way that befits Halloween, but I totally agree with you that it's probably too over the top for this material. And I think it's only really problematic because he has the same exact outfit on and because he reacts to Loomis the way he does. You know? He doesn't really run away. He kind of power walks in exactly the same way as Myers. Maybe the idea is that he can't see because he's wearing a mask, but I don't know.
Well, he's also drunk.
That's true.
They catch up with some of his friends later. That's when they figure out that it's been...
No, I know. Yeah, I know. I remember that. But I forgot that he was drunk. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
But maybe the real kicker is also the way he dies. Is just he happens to get hit by the cop and get run into the van, and it explodes and burns him in such a way that they can't really be sure if it's Michael. Although the outfit doesn't really match up completely, so they should have known from the get-go. It's got a different color to it. It's somewhat bluish and kind of yellowy.
Holy shit, that actually is the same woman. Well, I'll be damned. Well, that's a problem then, because I
didn't
get that impression.
I told you, see?
That's a problem then, because I didn't even get that impression from it at all.
Yeah, because the reason why I thought that was because...
She doesn't even feel like the same character, honestly. And the only thing that's the same is that she's smoking a cigarette.
Well, I got that sense, but the reason why I thought that she was the same character was because he says, I barely even recognized you, because she's not in a costume like she was that night. She clearly had come from a party or something. And she had a red cloak on. So, that's why I thought that.
I just always thought that she was supposed to be somebody else from Smith's Grove, who he,
likely she's somebody that he likes to work with, and they sent her so that way he probably wouldn't resist. And it was about to work until he thought that he was the only one who figured out where Michael was, which is true. So yeah, no, I enjoyed that. I thought that was another bit of good continuity. But we were talking about Laurie before. I want to go back to her because it's one thing I don't really love.
Oh, well, hold on. So I
Okay.
didn't really say my piece about this.
Okay.
It's just a stupid, ridiculous, over-the-top scene. I like the idea of it. I like the idea of Loomis being so gung-ho about killing Michael that he accidentally kills somebody who just happens to be wearing a similar mask. I like that idea, but it's done in such an over-the-top, ridiculous way that just doesn't fit the movie at all. It also raises a real logical question about like how common are these fucking masks? But I guess since Michael stole his from just a hardware store, I guess fine. I guess this is just a universe where that mask is common. But yeah, it's just so weird and over the top and ridiculous. And then to add insult to injury, later on they have it be Ben Tramer,
Right.
Um,
I didn't
so.
mind. I don't mind Ben Tramer getting killed being mistaken for Michael Myers. I think what makes that scene problematic is just the way he dies. Do you agree? And the fact that he has the same costume.
Certainly. And again, just how over the top ridiculous it is.
Yeah. I think that it doesn't necessarily mesh with this material. However, it's certainly shocking. But I think that's I think that's an example of this movie not being directed by John Carpenter. It's just it feels like it comes from a different kind of horror movie that he wouldn't have directed. It doesn't match with the deadpan subtlety of the original, which is something that worked so well about it.
We're actually lucky that this one turned out as well as it did because Rick Rosenthal went on to direct one more Halloween movie in his career, and it was Halloween Resurrection. So the fact that he pulled
really?
Yeah. So the fact that he pulled this off is actually something of a miracle.
Which is definitely the most comedically over the top and silly of all of them, so I can definitely see that. And there's maybe bits of that in this film. The ambulance driver who's just like, maybe I just fuck up all the time. He's kind of over the top in such a way where he doesn't really feel like a real person. And that clashes with what we've been saying about how these films feel like they're set in the real world, and the only thing that feels unreal about them is Michael Myers. That guy clashes with that. Would you agree?
Yeah.
So I didn't love him. Another thing I don't love, if you don't mind me saying it, I don't love Laurie's role. I feel like she kind of gets written out. She's mostly resigned to laying in bed the whole time.
Yeah, she's not in it for long stretches.
I kind of wish she had been forced to get out of bed and be on the run from Michael Myers earlier. So that way, maybe we could see her being put through more dramatic, horrific situations because she's already injured from the previous from the night's previous encounter. So
yeah.
I thought that would have added more tension, but she spends a lot of the movie hiding and slowly piecing together that she's Michael's sister on her own. She has no evidence of that. She figures that out on her own. Oh, no,
Right.
Or does Loomis tell her?
No. Loomis finds out from Marion.
Yeah, well, they have official evidence to tell them that. But I'm pretty sure fucking Laurie figures it out on her own just by her little weird dream flashbacks.
Yeah, well, she figures it out after one of the nurses tells her that the guy that was after her was Michael Myers, and that seems to cause her to start having these memory flashbacks.
I guess that's okay. That's slightly over the top and cheesy for this material, do you think?
Yeah, listen, I know it's the main point of the franchise now, but I'm not in love with making Laurie Michael's sister. John Carpenter isn't either. He wrote the script for this movie because he likes money, but he's always felt that it was not a a great idea. The only reason he did it is because you have to sort of pull back the curtain a little bit on a sequel, or else it's just, remaking the same movie again. And so he came up with this twist. From the way he described it, he came up with it at like 6 o'clock in the morning with a six-pack of beer. Uh, so yeah, not,
I didn't completely hate it.
and it shows in some places. One of the ways that this movie is behind the first is that the script just isn't as good. But
I didn't completely hate the idea of it. I thought the way they played it was problematic because it didn't crop up until like 3/3 of the way through. Like it was in the last act that even became a role.
the problem,
I feel like all they had to do was just set it up a little earlier, have some idea of it at the beginning that something to that effect was going on, and it would have worked out fine. But there was zero indication of that until suddenly Laurie has that moment where she has that dream flashback, and then the nurse from the first movie is like, "Oh, we found a new file on Michael Myers nobody's ever seen before."
yeah. The problem with
That's what I found problematic about it. I don't mind the idea of it.
the problem with it is it just makes Michael less scary to me because suddenly you have a motivation. Suddenly it becomes about killing his family rather than just being this sort of mysterious person who kills whomever he chooses. It just removes some of the menace from the character. You feel like that if you existed in this universe, as long as you're not related to him and stay out of his way, you'll be fine. Whereas in the first movie, he was just going around killing seemingly random people for no apparent reason other than that he chose Laurie and was.
So, Dylan, you were just saying that us learning that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister somewhat taints the character's characterization because, if you're not a Strode, his niece or whatever, he's not going to try and stab you, right? Or at least he'll be less motivated to stab you.
Michael Myers to me is ambiguity personified, and I think anytime you pull back the curtain on that, you sort of tarnish what was there originally to varying degrees. Try to explain Michael Myers, they wind up ruining Michael Myers. We saw this happen in 6. We saw this happen in the Zombie remake.
It's a lot worse in those movies, I think.
Well, yeah. But this is sort of the start of that. This
Without
is where
a doubt.
Because yes, it is worse in those movies than it is in this movie. But what they did in this movie in making her the sister is what set those things up. You wouldn't have the Thorn cult thing in 6, or all the sort of background family drama in the Rob Zombie remake without this idea of him being after his family. This is the beginning. They created a mythos that wasn't there before, and in so doing, they completely changed the game on what the series was moving forward.
Now, the motivation in this film in particular, outside of everything they did with it later, is just to get Michael to go to the hospital where she is. That's it, right? That's the only thing that succeeds in doing.
Which you don't even need it for that, even.
No, I don't think you do. I think that's the problem with it here. I'm not against the idea inherently, because I've always been a huge fan of this series, and that mythos is part of it to me. And the fact that they're doing something with it that's not going to follow that is going to be interesting, to say the least. But what I found going back to it this time was super problematic about it is that it's in there for zero reason. And it comes out of nowhere. It's super contrived isn't even the word. It's almost like this was a TV series, and this was like the penultimate before the season finale. And suddenly they had revealed that somebody who we thought was dead for seasons upon seasons was actually alive and has been behind everything the whole time. That's what that is. Except it's a movie, and you don't do stuff like that in a movie. And there's a reason for it. Do you want to do? I don't know if we've already said what the reason is for it. There's definitely no time gap in between what we've said before and what we've said now. But do you want to say the reason for it, just in case?
The reason for what now? I'm sorry.
The fact that A, they made Laurie Strode his sister, and B, why it feels so rushed in the last part of the movie.
Oh, well, I don't know if I already talked about this or not, but John Carpenter,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. I
um,
don't remember.
okay, John Carpenter didn't want to make a sequel. That's why he didn't direct it. He did agree to write it because John Carpenter, above all else, loves loves money. He's quoted as saying about the Halloween sequels that he didn't think they should have happened, but this magical thing kept happening where like a paycheck would appear in his mailbox, and that would make it all better. So yeah, he agreed to write it, and he knew instinctively that when you're doing a sequel, you have to expand on it a little bit, or else it's just a rehash. And the idea to make Michael Laurie's sister, who I mean, make Michael Laurie's brother, who some have speculated might have been inspired by the fact that this was right after Empire Strikes Back came out, and there was that whole family plot twist in that. Um,
Well, yeah,
the
it was
dec-
Luke was Vader's son. They didn't do the brother sister thing until the next one.
yeah, that's true. Interesting.
Well, there is that
The,
line where you're just like, there is another.
true.
I guess I don't know. Anyway, your point. Go ahead.
Yes. But yeah, that was the idea. The idea behind the family angle. He knew he had to expand on the mythos a little bit, and so he created this motivation for why Michael is chasing Laurie.
When did he
Um,
create it?
well, based on what he said in interviews, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning with a 6 pack of beer, writing this script that he did he didn't even want to be writing. You can obviously tell that
That's
it's an
how it
inferior
comes
script.
off in the movie, and that's the problem. That's why it's bad. I don't think the idea is inherently flawed. It's not amazing. I think there are better ideas for it. I think I think the real thing they should have done, and also D, if you don't mind, unplug your microphone and plug it back in. It's kind of cutting in and out. I think that might be fixed if you do that. Uh, what I was gonna say though is that what they should have done is have Mike. Yeah, it sounds better now. It's not cutting out. They should have had Michael go to the hospital after Laurie because she got away from him. They should have made it that simple. And she hurt him a lot. She did a lot of damage. Loomis did a lot of damage because of her. So that's it. Like, that's all you need. And boom, you're going. And if they wanted to peel back the curtain in any way, I would, anything else they could have done with it probably would have been better because it would have been through that lens. And I think we also made this point earlier. Laurie should have woken up earlier and been doing stuff earlier and on her feet running away from Michael earlier, because that's all kind of interesting when she's injured towards the end, running away from. But there's very little of it. She spends so much of it hiding. I think there should be more active stuff like there was in the first movie, but we don't see that as much.
That's
But
what I was
I
about
think
to say.
you
How
could
much
have done
scarier is-
whatever the hell you wanted with Michael Myers outside of that in that time while he's being injured further, if anything.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. How much scarier would this movie be if it was just Michael chasing her because she got away in the first movie? Because the whole time in the first movie, he's characterized, and we talked about this, he's basically a human shark in that movie, is kind of his characterization.
Yeah, we compared it to Jaws a lot, which I think is super accurate.
But if you escape a shark attack, the shark doesn't, like, follow you for the rest of your life and wait for you to fuck up, unless you're the Brody family from the Jaws series. A shark will swim away and try to eat another fish. How much scarier is it if Michael Myers will, once he's selected a victim, will just keep following them? And then you, the viewer, is like, holy shit, I don't know why this guy selects a person, but once he does, he will never stop. And they've done that in other franchises.
They kind of did that in the first movie.
They do that in other slasher franchises. Chucky is always after the same select group of people. Every now and then they introduce a new person who's part of his hit list, but he does have a hit list, and so that's why you get recurring characters and shit. And that was, he spent 3 movies trying to put his soul in fucking Andy's body. Another example is Scream. Different killers in that movie, all coming after the same girl for various reasons.
Right.
That's been done to great effect in other franchises. And
But
I think
those
it would
are
be
all
so
with
much
more specific reasons that have been more fleshed out.
Right. I think that Halloween would be so much more effective if it was just
If it was a little more ambiguous than those even.
exactly, because, well, first of all, it retroactively makes the first movie super fucking convenient that the girl who was his sister who got adopted by other people just happened to drop the key off at his house and he saw her there. that makes that super convenient when originally it was like,
And weird
just a
that her
really,
dad is like, oh yeah, go drop off the key to that house that you used to live in that you don't know about.
it's super convenient, and then it also makes it just makes it less in the first movie. He literally sees her walk up on his porch and drop off some keys, and that's it. He
Like, oh
selects her
shit,
at that
she's
moment.
coming home.
He selects her at that moment, and he stalks her for the rest of the movie, and that is so much more frightening to me than, ooh, I get my long lost baby sister, gonna stab her real good. Like, why? Like, what?
Because then you could
It's even-
analyze it more. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think you can analyze it there where it's like he goes after her because she has no fear. Here's this creepy house. She doesn't give a fuck, but because she's just like, I don't. It's not scary. It's not haunted. It's just a rackety old house. I have to drop off the key. That's what happens. So I think maybe that attracts him to her above all else.
It's even dumber in the Rob Zombie ones. Not to even mention what they do with Laurie in the second
We
film.
will get there in many years when we're old and gray.
But the first Rob Zombie movie, it's really weird because, we know that Laurie is his sister from the first movie this time around because it was already established. In hindsight, Rob Zombie gets to have that be a plot point from the beginning. But it makes it super weird because like the baby is there in the house when Michael stabs Judith, and then when the parents come home, Michael's sitting on the front steps holding the baby. Like he's super like brotherly towards the baby sister, even though he just stabbed the adult sister. And so in that version, it's like, oh, you're an adult now, I'm gonna kill you. Like it's
Well, it seems to be more convoluted and weird in terms of his motivation.
He only likes babies. It seems that's
right.
Michael's thing.
And he doesn't go
Just
after kids in either of these, I don't think. Especially since there's a whole ward of babies in this film, and he doesn't go near them. So I guess you can say that that's again another subtle thing that becomes a really super overt through line later on when they readapted this concept.
He didn't chase any kids until 4.
Right, when he's going after his own niece. And then I think in 5 he does kill some kids. But we're not talking about that stuff. In these first 2 movies, in the first film, he doesn't go anywhere near Tommy or Lindsay.
No.
So
They just have... I think if they had gotten in his way or tried to stop him in some way, he probably would have killed them.
Yeah, we don't know, but he didn't go after them in the same way that he was actively, following and stalking and then pouncing on all the teenagers.
Although he did stalk Tommy some early on, probably in order to figure out where Laurie was, I guess. Because you have him outside the school, and that one bully runs out and accidentally collides with him. You have...
Yeah, and I think that scene is why I feel he's not going to kill a kid. He's like, all right, well, this kid's annoying, but I'm not going to kill him because he's a kid.
Dogs, sure. Not kids. No.
He eats a dog. He breaks that movie rule. He won't kill a kid, but he'll eat a dog. He preserves one movie rule and breaks another. I find that interesting and badass about Michael Myers.
It's a dumb rule anyway.
It's not really a rule. It's not like it's not written somewhere. It's just it's a thing that it's a thing that movie producers will tell you.
It's just a stupid thing about dog people, Like, I think some people got outraged in The Incredible Hulk when Blonsky shoots that one dog, and I'm like, no, if a dog comes at you...
It's also a trank dart.
Is it a trank dart?
Yeah.
I didn't even know it was a trank dart, and I still didn't give a fuck, because that dog was coming for him, and I would have shot the damn thing too, fuck.
It wasn't coming for him in The Incredible Hulk. It was just, sitting there.
I mean... Oh, that's right. Whatever, I don't give a fuck.
I mean, he's the bad guy!
I'm more of a fucking cat person, but if I'm watching a movie and there's some mangy ass cat attacking a person, I'd be like, yeah, fucking shoot that cat.
Yeah, just because I'm a cat person, I've had cats my whole life. Like sometimes when they do something to a cat in a movie, I get a little like, oh no, because I think of my cats, but. It's not any sense of oh, you should never hurt an animal in a movie. If the story calls for it, you gotta do what you gotta do to do it effectively. You don't want to be gratuitous about it, because then that's something I'm never into. But regardless of what the content is, it's just gratuitous gore. I just don't care.
as long as it's not real on-grade animal murder, which is just
Well, yeah, obviously that's a different thing then.
that poor fucking snake in Friday the 13th. Oh my god.
Dylan, you're cutting out real bad. Yeah, the connection's not great. Unplug your mic and plug it back in again. That at least seems to fix the problem temporarily and make your audio a little clearer. But to get us back to Halloween, where dogs are only killed off screen, or very very subtly, kind of sort of on frame in the first film. But we're back to the second one though. But like I said, I just think the whole reveal doesn't really work because it's done way too late to really matter, and it doesn't really serve any real purpose. It doesn't create any more emotional weight in the scenes between Laurie and Michael than was already there because it's a guy trying to fucking kill her. I do like the idea, to go back a little bit though, that she doesn't find out who was going after her until this one. And it's kind of a twist to her because at the very least she knows the name Myers because she dropped off the key there. So had they not done the brother-sister thing, I almost feel like it could have been more interesting. Like she could have almost put together the sequence of events from the first movie in her own head from Michael's point of view based on that knowledge.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting. But they don't do anything with that because she's his sister.
Yeah, and then how much creepier would it have been if they hadn't done the brother-sister thing when you eventually get around to like H2O and he's still after her ass 20 years later? And then she's like, why the fuck does he still have to be? And somebody's just like, 'cause you got away.
Yeah, it really doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. That being said, outside of that element, I feel the climax is actually pretty good. I really like that bit where Loomis and Laurie are turning on and off the gas valves to confuse Michael after he's been blinded.
Yeah,
because he's swinging around based on sound. By the way, do you think it's really inconsistent how I meant to bring this up earlier. I'm glad that we're getting to it now. Do you think it's really inconsistent how intelligent Michael Myers is? Because sometimes he comes across as a just totally out to lunch, insane, zero common sense kind of crazy person. And then sometimes he comes across as somewhat calculating.
Yeah, I think it's a symptom of him sort of being stunted. He's been locked up in this mental institution since he was 6 years old. And so he's an adult now, but I think at the same time he reverts back to childhood sometimes,
Sure. But I think that I feel that there are some things that he does in the first, like, does he really know how to drive? I guess not. Although he seems to be doing fine.
He was doing very well last night.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that's an example of Loomis trying to imply that not only is he more intelligent than they give him credit for, but he's somewhat, like, not hyper intelligent, but he's cunning. And maybe it's just a strictly kind of predatory animal kind of cunning, which is interesting and fine. But I'd like to know a little more about it. That's why I think Loomis needs more screen time in these movies. But that's another reason why I like this one so much, because he does get a lot of screen time. And it feels like such a direct continuation of the last movie in the sense of his character as well. I really like when he whips out the gun and he's threatening the marshal to fucking go to the clinic where he knows Michael Myers is.
Yeah. Like man on the edge, Loomis.
Yeah, he was already kind of edge in the first movie. Like the sheriff indicated that whenever he fucking saw him whip out his gun, there's more of that in this.
Yeah. As much as I love Donald Pleasance in 4, you can totally tell that this was supposed to be fucking the end of his character. Because like even before he dies, he's obviously dead.
Oh yeah, I mean everything, the whole fucking. I mean, so's Michael. I mean, everything blows up.
But even before that happens, he's so far out on the edge. I mean, it's his life's effectively over. He's just threatened a U.S. Marshal at gunpoint. He's disobeyed orders. He's never going to work in this field again. he's on the path to just being like a broken old man in a nursing home. You know, like that's where he would have ended up if he hadn't died at the end of this movie. So that it's clearly the end of the road for this character,
Absolutely.
regardless of whether or not he had actually died or not.
And
And
he
I like
should
that. I like that he's so devoted to this cause that he's willing to just go for broke.
again. I don't know if we mentioned this earlier, but he really is the Van Helsing to Michael Myers as Dracula.
Yes, I don't know if we mentioned that either, but it's definitely something I meant to say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that element. I
Yeah,
love
it's really well done because he believes that Michael Myers is just this absolute incarnation of evil. So he will pursue him to the ends of the earth because he believes in the idea of smiting evil.
I think it's even better than Helsing versus Dracula because it's more personal. You know, Helsing doesn't know Dracula
It
before
depends
they
on
have
the version, but yeah, you're right, absolutely.
before they have their first encounter. I mean, obviously, when you get like into like Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee territory, and they fight each other on multiple occasions, then obviously they know each other. But
Get the Helsing where he owns him anyway.
but classic Van Helsing, talking about book Van Helsing, talking
Yeah,
about
your
Eddie
traditional
Van- well,
archetypical literature version. This is directly aping that and making it more personal and making it more real world savvy.
yeah,
And more
this
modern at the same time.
this is what the Dracula Frank Helsing relationship would be if like Van Helsing had been like working for Dracula as like a butler or something before he turned into a vampire. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
that's the
it depends. Well, there's an
there's a
extent.
there's a familiarity going on.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not like Loomis was in any way responsible for Michael killing originally. He feels responsible for what's going on now. Definitely. It's almost. I think it's almost
There are
more.
even moments. There are even moments, not so much in this film, but in some of the further sequels, where you almost feel like there's a little bit of a mutual respect between the two of them, even though Loomis is obviously trying to stop Michael, and Michael is willing to kill Loomis if he gets in the way. But there are moments where you almost feel like that there's a mutual respect for each other. Like, you know, in 4, Michael could have killed him in that gas station, you know. In 5, he kind of lets him get the drop on him and beat the shit out of him. That was a really stupid ending to that movie. But you get what I mean. He might be the only person that at least, you know, in those sequels, because he doesn't give a fuck about stabbing Loomis in 2. But further on, as they develop that relationship, it's almost as if he's the one person that Michael might take pause at the mention of killing. Maybe just because he was a psychiatrist for so many years, and you know, maybe he came close to breaking through to him a couple times. Who knows? You know, we'll never know.
Right. We won't because we're never gonna watch any of the sequels ever. No, we are. We're gonna review them at some point. But you know, I agree with everything he said, and I think it's cool. What else do you want to say about Halloween 2, Dylan?
Well, you know, this might be something fun to do. And you know, I'll extend this question to both movies. Give me an answer for both movies because we didn't do this for the first one either. I want to know what your favorite kill is in these movies. For me, it's Linda's boyfriend in 1 because that's such an iconic moment where when he tilts his head after he stabs him against the door. And then my favorite kill in 2, which there's a lot more variety to choose from, is probably the chick who he keeps dunking her head into the hot tub.
Oh, you stole mine. That fucked with me.
And at first you think she's just going to drown, which, you know, whatever. But, like, the heat on the hot tub keeps going up. And eventually, like, her skin is peeling. Like, she's getting fucked up in that thing. He's boiling her alive.
This is from 2. I'll go back to 1. In 2, he kills somebody by doing something we mentioned on the last SOS podcast. He fills a syringe with oxygen and injects her with it, and she atrophies. That happens. It's really quick. It's really quick. I had to go back and confirm that's what happened, but that's what he does.
Yeah, I definitely remember he killed 2 people that way.
Yeah, well, that's that's the thing. He stabbed him in the eye, but he doesn't use that syringe, or if he does, it would be empty anyway. But I don't think he does. I think he picks up another.
He definitely doesn't. He definitely doesn't because
I remember him filling it. There's no bottle he fills it. It's literally just he takes it, he fills it with air, and then he stabs her with it. He injects her, and then she dies. That's it. I remember it vividly. I went back to it to confirm that's what happened. I just couldn't remember if it was the same syringe.
It definitely isn't because that syringe is still sticking out of the other dude's eyeball when he comes up behind her and
Right.
stabs her
That's awesome.
with, with
It's
the other one. It is great. It's great. I wasn't sure that it was empty, but that's a great kill either way. Another good one, and we don't get to see this one. This one's off screen, but the head nurse, the bitchy head nurse, when the guy finds her on the table, and Michael has just like stuck a tube in her arm and let her bleed out.
Oh, and he slips on the blood and he gets knocked out. That's great too.
Yeah, that was another weird moment. I wasn't sure if he was supposed to be dead or just knocked out because
I thought
I
maybe
mean,
he was dead, but I remembered him being in more of it. So I was actually surprised he didn't live. His death was weak. He just dropped in he just like collapsed in a fucking seat in a car. I can't even remember what exactly happened. I guess Michael had like he just kind of bled out from whatever, but I couldn't remember. He just kind of dropped.
yeah, first Ben Tramer and now this guy. Can none of Laurie's love interests make it through Halloween 2? Who the
I guess
fuck fathers those kids that she has in all these other continuities?
that's a great question because we know she doesn't survive long past this film. Because the pictures you see of her in 4, that you see for like a second, she looks exactly like she does in this.
Yeah, she doesn't last much longer than this movie, at least not in the Halloween 4 continuity.
No, because that's also not that much longer. I mean, it's like what 5, like not even 5 years, right? It's like 4 years.
What, in between Halloween 2 and 4?
Yeah.
No, sir, 10 years.
What?
Well,
Really?
no, fuck, 7. What I meant is it takes place 10 years after the Halloween 1978. It takes place in 88, which is the year the movie came out. So it's 7 years after Halloween 2.
All right. I didn't know it was that late. I thought it was earlier in the 80s. My fault. My fault.
Yeah, and then they rushed 5 into production, and it came out in 89, and then 6 came out like mid to late 90s. They took forever to develop that fucking train wreck. And then we got H2O.
They like frantically rebooted with H2O and
in 98, and then I think Resurrection was like in 2001 or something like that.
ugh. And then of course you had the zombie remakes. But in 1, I really like, this isn't a kill, this is just kind of imagery. I like when Loomis finds the gas station attendant's truck and he doesn't even really see the body. He just kind of knows it's somewhere. And you see it in the reeds in the foreground. But Loomis never sees it. I love that. And we don't even know what Michael did to that guy. It could have even just been his head. We don't even know. We only see a piece of it.
I never loved Linda's death scene. Like the strangling with the phone cord is fine, but the whole lead up where he comes in with the sheet over his head, like what the fuck?
Yeah, I didn't know what he was doing there unless he just wanted to see some titties, which is what he got. So
I guess it was a way for him to enter the room and have her think that it was just her boyfriend playing a trick on her.
Right, which what's purpose does that serve though? Because it's not like he did anything to make her think that he was. It's not like he actively tried to make her think that, except that he had the clothes on. And if anything,
right.
it almost just felt like another weird way he was fucking with them. Like that's another thing. In the first movie, he's a little more like stereotypically serial killer kind of. He sets up stuff at the scenes of his crimes, like when he sets up Judith's headstone behind Linda's body.
Yeah, that's another interesting thing about Michael Myers. He
doesn't really do that later. Occasionally he'll do it, but not to the same consistency.
Sometimes Michael Myers gets very artistic in the way he displays his bodies. I mean, we were just talking about Annie with Judith's tombstone behind her.
That's Annie, right? That's not Linda. I'm sorry.
He sets up the dude's body to like swing down in the doorway when Laurie bumps up against it. That was pretty cool.
And then Linda's stuffed in the closet.
Yeah. In the second movie, that death I was talking about with the head nurse where he sticks the tube in her arm and she just bleeds out all over the floor, that's super, like, artistic and, like, beautiful. You know what I mean? Like, he's an artiste, that Michael Myers.
You know what else I like? I like when he goes into the old couple's house towards the beginning of 2, and he steals the knife that she was using to cut the ham, and she comes back over, and there's just blood on the counter because... he was covered in blood. This is right after he got shot by Loomis, so.
Yeah. I wish, you're right though, that does kind of get lost in a lot of, I wish they would have done more of that throughout the series.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, they got so preoccupied with his, like, familial obsession that they kind of lost some of the more traditional serial killer sides of him.
Yeah, yeah. I like Michael Myers who takes time to display his bodies in creative ways. One of my favorite moments in
Well, he
Halloween
isn't just a
H2O.
machine. Like they made him into the Terminator. You know,
Yeah,
he wasn't the Terminator in the first movie. He was the Predator.
one of my favorite moments in H2O. He hangs this. Well, he basically like carves out this girl's midsection and then hangs her from the ceiling by the light bulb. So basically, he turns her body into like a human
That's an
jack-o'-lantern because the light
H2O,
bulb.
right?
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, I
because like
remember
the
that.
light bulb at her chest cavity. That was a
Yeah,
cool
that was
moment.
cool. But
Need
H2O
more.
is better than a lot of the other sequels, although I really we'll talk about that one at some point. Because it goes back to some of the traditional elements from the first two in particular. One last thing I want to say about two, I really like, I think I probably said this earlier anyway, but I just want to make sure. I really like the setting of the hospital. All the bullshit in this movie that we've talked about, a lot of it is somewhat inconsequential to me just because of the setting. We talked about it. One thing we talked about was that it doesn't really make sense, that it's somewhat unpopulated. We went into that. I don't really care because it's cool looking. It reminds me of Batman Arkham Asylum. That's what I was reminded of.
Yeah, a hospital is definitely a good idea as a setting for a horror film.
I really
There's
wanted
another
to go back to that game after watching Halloween 2. And
one.
whenever I
Yeah,
played that game when I was young, I always got mad Halloween 2 vibes.
because I think we've all had those moments. We've all been in hospitals before, and they can be spooky as shit.
Yeah, I mean, I think we mentioned earlier how they're always crowded. That's not necessarily true. I have been to them super late. Like I slept at a hospital once. Well, actually more than once. But one time I slept there by choice because my brother had been there for a while, so I wanted to sleep over with him one night. And yeah, I mean, when you're there at like 3 a.m, it's dead. There's nobody around. I mean,
Yeah,
except around the nurse. I mean, you go to a nurse's station, there's more people around there nowadays, but in 1978, I maybe buy that there's less, but it's obviously not to this extent. What I don't
but there
buy
should
is
still
that there's
be,
only
but
one
there should
security
still,
guard. That's insane.
and only one adult patient. That's the other kicker for me. Yeah, a hospital is pretty dead
Oh,
in the
and
wee
only
hours of the
2
morning.
ambulance drivers.
Yeah, a hospital is dead in the wee hours of the morning, but there should be more people in the beds. The beds should at least
The
like there should be more.
emergency room is not dead.
Exactly. Um,
And I don't know, maybe they
yeah,
don't have an emergency room. I mean, but I guess
and I get that
Is
Haddonfield,
Laurie's situation like an emergency room situation? I don't know.
and I get that Haddonfield isn't supposed to be that big of a town, but it's not really a hick town. Not until four. It's not really a hick town at this point. It's just supposed to be like small middle town America. So there should definitely be more patients in there. That's my whole beef. And
Absolutely. But
probably
regardless, it's a cool setting.
more staff. But hey, what are you gonna do?
Absolutely. Dylan, what else do you want to say? What else needs to be
I,
said?
I think another thing that this movie suffers for is that it isn't as independent as the original film. The original film is this little independent movie that managed to pick up this huge following, and as a result, the sequel got a little bit more money behind it. It becomes much more studio-y,
I think it's half and half.
Uh,
I think half of it
yeah,
feels exact. I mean, because I think what's really good about this movie is that it feels like a total direct. It's the directest of all direct sequels, and and tonally it mostly works in that sense. But I absolutely agree with you that there is an absolute conflict. I think we talked about this earlier anyway. In a lot of the scenes, particularly in the kill scenes and the building up of suspense. That feels more mainstream horror, more things that were inspired by Halloween, more just everything that has been made by studios. Remember the Universal logo is at the beginning of this, so.
I mean, look, the worst, the worst thing that all of the worst things I should say, all of the worst things that have ever happened in the Halloween franchise, and there have been plenty of bad things in the Halloween franchise, is because the studio didn't know what to do with it. And I think this is the start of that.
Mm.
It's not ruined by that by any means. I like Halloween 2. I criticize it because I do like it, and I wish it was better than it even is. But
it's still competent and very entertaining.
Indeed, indeed.
And that's my whole thing is I have a lot of nostalgia for this one, even independently from one. I actually preferred this to one when I was a kid because there's more action in it, and I liked the setting. I just really liked the setting of the hospital. I thought that was cooler than just a couple of houses. But as I grew older, I started to realize the first one was simply more raw and visceral and effective at what it was setting out to do, whereas 2 is muddled, to say the least. So I definitely think that if you're going to go back to any of them, definitely, I don't think 2 is worth. I don't think it's like you have to skip 2. I mean, if you don't love 1, if you just watch it and you're like, oh, I understood the intent there, that was fine, definitely don't watch 2. But if you watch 1 and you're like, oh my god, that was right up my fucking alley, I need more of that, definitely watch 2. Because it'll definitely satisfy that need.
Totally.
You will love that. You will love the way they just go, oh, the last movie ended, now the second one's starting right now. It's great in that particular sense above all else, but it's really entertaining in its own right, and I think that on Halloween it's definitely worth it to be part of your marathon. So I don't know, Dylan. Michael Myers, one of our favorite horror icons, fucking the last day of DFOS horror movie reviews in the month of October.
There's one last thing I'd like to mention.
Oh, boy.
That I'd like to discuss briefly.
Okay.
You've already alluded to this a few times, but let's talk about this upcoming Halloween project. This is interesting news, since we're talking about this.
Oh, right.
Since
what
we're
is
talking
it
about
called?
this franchise,
Is there a title?
We don't have a title yet, so I don't think so. As far as I know, it's just called Halloween Again, but I don't know for sure.
It's called Halloween Again? No, I'm kidding.
I don't think that they've officially announced the title, but yeah, I for the meantime I'm calling it Halloween H40. So the first bit of news that I got regarding this was the fact that Jamie Lee Curtis was returning. I didn't even know they were doing another one next year until that happened, and that left me scratching my head because I was getting some serious deja vu, and I don't even remember the build up to Halloween H2O in '98, but I imagine it felt a lot like this. It felt like they were doing the same thing over again, didn't it? But then we started getting some other news regarding this sequel, and personally, I'm kind of excited because, for one, we got John Carpenter producing, not directing, but producing.
Which immediately makes me more excited because then that goes back to 2, which it still has his mark on it despite him not directing it. So that makes me more excited.
The other huge thing that John Carpenter is doing for this movie that has me pumped is that he's doing the score.
I didn't know that either. That's fucking great.
Yeah, he's going to compose it. So that's fucking news.
And who's directing it? Is it still Danny McBride?
Was he directing it, or is he just help writing it? See, I'm not really sure about that aspect. But here's the other big thing. It's Blumhouse. And Blumhouse has a really good track record. They have a good sort of rep in the horror community. If any studio is gonna take this and do it right, it's Blumhouse. Blumhouse is it's like what New Line used to be. They've got sort of independent sensibilities with big distribution. I think they've got to deal with, like, is it Universal or Warner Brothers? One of those big studios actually distributes their movies, but they have very independent sensibilities when they're about actually making the movies, and that's caused them to make some movies that have been very well regarded as far as horror goes over the past, I don't know, fucking decade now. They've been doing them. They're like the anti-Platinum Dunes. If Platinum Dunes was doing this remake or this sequel, I would be fucking shit pants, be like, no, please, no. But it's Blumhouse, so I've got some. I'm excited to see what they come up with.
I'm excited to see it. I'm not like super anticipating it, like, oh my god, I must know everything about it, but I'll definitely see it when it's out. I don't know. I like the idea of going back to the first movie and trying to continue it in the present day. I'm interested to see why they're bringing back Jamie Lee Curtis. You think she's going to be like the realty head of Haddonfield nowadays, and that's going to be the whole thing? She's going to own all the houses.
Could be. We also know that Judy Greer is playing her daughter in this movie. It's going to be her third child that she's had in an alternate canon.
Yeah. She's like, I keep forgetting my retcon children.
I almost wonder if they're going to do like the Friday the 13th thing, where Jamie Lee Curtis just gets murdered by Michael at the beginning of the movie, and then the rest of the movie is Judy Greer finding out what the fuck happened. And
I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think they would market her appearance now. I think they would have left that as a surprise.
Oh, they certainly did with Resurrection. They rode that H2O hype to the max. I mean, she's in the movie for like 10 minutes maybe.
Oh yeah, and she's
like
she's on the poster, and she's on the VHS cover.
She's all on the poster with the same haircut she had in H2O, which just tells you it's bullshit, you know.
Absolutely, but they're not going to do. But marketing is so it's like it's created in a laboratory now, you know. So I don't think that they would push her being in it this much now. She'll probably have like a Han Solo in the Force Awakens role, maybe even like a Rick Deckard in Blade Runner 2049, which I would also be fine with if it was largely about another character, and then she's just kind of in a little bit. But if she's the main character, great.
I would even be sort of satisfied if they did sort of a Bryan Cranston Godzilla thing with her, only because that's basically what they did with her mom in Psycho, and that would be really cool that she would do the same thing. You know what I mean?
Above all else, it's really all about what they do with Michael, the approach they take with his characterization and his motivation. Or just what he's doing. I want is he just going to be, and where he's been? That's another big thing, you know. And why hasn't he been active or if he's been active in the 40 years since the original? These are the questions they need to answer that will make this movie work or break it for me.
If anybody's listening to this and maybe doesn't know, because I was talking about Blumhouse before, the production company. If anybody doesn't know their shit, just earlier this year, they had Get Out, which was a huge hit. I didn't see that, but I heard nothing but good things. That last M. Night Shyamalan movie that was actually good, and everybody was like, what? That was them.
Split?
Yeah. The Conjuring movies, I'm pretty sure they did those. I saw the first Conjuring, and it was good. I never saw any of the other ones. So yeah, they've got a track record. You know?
I've never seen any of those things, but hey, I'm sure it'll be fine.
So
I'll watch it.
I'm excited to see what they come up with.
Me too.
Just please, no Rick Rosenthal.
Yeah.
Don't have him direct. I know 2. We were just talking about how 2 is probably the strongest sequel overall.
To me, without a doubt, there's really very little competition outside of 4.
But then he went out there and
H2O.
But then he went out there and made Resurrection, and that's no good.
That's the reason why fuck Rick Rosenthal, because he made that, not because he made 2.
The guy directing next year's movie is David Gordon Green, so it's not Danny McBride. It's the guy that Danny McBride is writing the movie with, and he's mostly done comedies before, which is the same thing for Danny McBride. They're sort of switching genres here, but apparently they're both like huge horror fans. So
yeah, Danny McBride's done horror stuff before in the supporting capacity. He was in Alien Covenant.
That's true. That is true. I didn't think about that.
He was a funny character in it, but he was in it. And one of my favorite parts of it, I know that a lot of people hated his character. I don't care. I thought he was funny. And he was one of the few things in that movie that were like, oh, a person with a personality. Cool.
I don't know. Nice. I feel like Halloween 2018 is going to be my next year's It, because we're not getting It Part 2 until presumably 2019, right? Surely they're not going to rush that out a year later.
They've already announced the release date, so I'm pretty sure it is 2019.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure as well.
They haven't cast it yet. Presumably, maybe they probably cast it now. They probably just haven't announced it yet.
I would imagine they're probably working on it, and I'm sure we'll get an announcement as soon as they get some big developments as far as who's playing who.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there's no way they're not going to be promoting the fuck out of that movie for the next 2 fucking years solid.
Yeah, they might overhype that potentially, because like the first one was really good, but it might not. They might like, I don't know. I have the same concern with the next Deadpool. They might overhype it and just kill it. We'll have to see.
You know what? Past Halloween director I wouldn't mind seeing get another crack at it is old Tommy Wallace, who was the editor on the first movie and directed the It miniseries. He also directed Halloween 3, which gets a bum rap because it doesn't have Michael in it. But I like that movie a lot.
But 3 is of a higher caliber than most of the sequels to 1 because it does its own thing. So definitely, I'd love to see him. I'd love to see him do something with Michael Myers.
Oh yeah, I might even like 3 more than 10s. It depends on the day, depends on my mood.
Three more than what?
More than 2. Just
Oh, I
depending on the day.
haven't seen it yet, but I can see that based on the originality of the premise.
Got that great fuck you ending. Oh, it's amazing. You haven't seen Halloween 3 Season of the Witch, Art? I'm calling it right now. Last review of Halloween month for 2018 has got to be Season of the Witch. We gotta pop
I
your
thought
Season
we
of the
were
Witch.
gonna do another Michael Myers. No, it's fine. We'll do that one. We can come back to Michael Myers.
If you want to do 2 at a time again, we can do 3 and 4.
That would be no. We have to do 4 and 5. No, we'll do Halloween 3 on its own.
What are you gonna pair 6 with? Fucking H2O, and then
No,
what are you gonna pair Red?
Six is its own animal. No,
Maybe
you know what? I guess we could do that as a trilogy. We could do that as one podcast. It would be long, but I'd be okay with that.
Well, we could devote an entire podcast to Season 6 if we watch both cuts and talk about the.
Oh, that's a good idea. There you go.
I actually haven't seen the producer's cut for myself. I just know about the
Me
differences.
neither. I've only seen whatever they play on TV.
Yeah, I've seen like the Cinema Snob review of it, so I know what the difference is, but I've never actually just sat down and watched it myself.
Well, this has gone a lot longer than we anticipated. We did another 45 minutes, so I think it is time to wrap this sucker up. It's time to finally put Michael Myers down for good. Nah, we can't ever. We'll come back to him. But yeah, so Dylan, that was Halloween 2017. Woo!
Great. In all seriousness, though, I hope everybody enjoyed this month of all horror everything here on the Zazubaar channel.
We hope we didn't overhype this holiday for you.
Commentaries of the Night was a blast. Our fucking serial killer game show was a blast.
Presumably the next game that we haven't recorded yet will be fine.
And all of these reviews were really fun to do. It amazes me that we've never done this before. Like, I don't know if this is the first time we've talked about horror movies, but we've never devoted
No,
the entire
obviously
month.
not, but it's the first time we've ever planned ahead this much.
It's the first time we've decided, hey, let's just fucking take October and devote it entirely to Halloween. And I can't believe we've never done that before. It's the most cliche fucking thing that everybody does. I don't think there's a single YouTube channel that produces similar content to ours that doesn't do that. But
it's way more natural with us because so much of what we talk about already fits into that wheelhouse.
Exactly.
So all that we did was go, oh, here's 10 times more specific stuff that we've been dying to talk about for a long time that we're now like more. Now we have a reason to do it.
Exactly. So
we'll continue to do things like that because it definitely gets us more excited, and I think when we're more excited, you guys are a little more excited as well. So, I hope that works out for you guys as it does for us. So
to be real though, if you're hoping for an all Christmas December, no.
No, we'll do one. That because Christmas I can't handle because Christmas doesn't have as much variety as Halloween. Like Halloween, there's a lot of variety to like what you could get into. We talked about serial killers, monsters, ghosts, whatever. But Christmas, it's like Santa,
Maybe it's
sad kids movie, Home Alone. These are the things. We already did Jingle All the Way, so we can't even go back to that, which is the pinnacle of Christmas movies.
That was a fun time. Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. I mean, we should bring Through the Shot Glass back for a Christmas special at the very least. So we'll do something like that there. But
yeah, I can get
we're not doing Jingle All the Way too.
I can get my hands with fucking booze. No, but Yeah, I guess it depends on your individual sensibilities, but I personally always get Christmas fatigue. I try not to even like celebrate Christmas until like halfway through the month so that it doesn't set in.
I try to not celebrate it
Uh,
until like Christmas Eve, cause so that way I don't get too fatigued. Cause I'm with you. I'm just, it's not, it's not to my sensibilities. It's too
what
warm,
what
too fuzzy.
pisses me off is how it is gradually taking over the entire fucking calendar. Like there's already fucking Christmas shit in store. Like my fucking grandmother, she's the she works for the Old Time Pottery Corporation. If you live in certain parts of the company or of the country, you know what Old Time Pottery is. If not, it's a big store. Anyway, um, they've already got fucking Halloween shit out. Or
I was
fuck
gonna
that,
say they probably should, and
they've already got fucking
if not,
Christmas
they
shit.
should get it out tomorrow.
They've already got the Christmas shit out. It's weird because the Halloween shit is also out, so it looks like fucking Nightmare Before Christmas in that bitch.
Every store is like that though.
Luckily, they haven't started playing the music yet because that's what really starts to get to you.
But yeah, the fact that they do that after Halloween now is insane. I just don't. I can't do it. Thank God I work at a job where I work with people who have the same sensibilities music wise as me. So we're just all classic vinyl all the time, baby. Because Christmas, if we were like some other people I've worked with in the past, where it's whatever's on the station, it would be Christmas music as soon as possible.
I mean, listen, I've accepted the fact. I have made peace with the fact that Thanksgiving is dead. Thanksgiving is a non-entity. It's just a day to eat too much.
It's just a day to eat too much now. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So by all means, muck up the Thanksgiving season with all your Christmas Yuletide
That's
cheer
fine.
and all that
Yeah,
bullshit.
it's pre-Christmas basically.
All your Black Friday Bundaroo ads. But for the love of God, let Halloween be.
Leave me my Halloween. Really, I think we should get. Do you think we should have Halloween? I mean, it doesn't matter for us. We're not in school. But do you think Halloween should be a day off?
I've always thought so, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why. The only reason they don't do that is because they're like, the kids are going to run rampant. They're going to do that anyway. Let them run rampant all day so that way they're not going to wreck your fucking school.
Are they just worried about pissing off like parents who come from a certain brand of Christianity who think that Halloween is like fucking of the devil and shit?
Oh, let's not even get into the fucking Christian people getting offended about having days off to celebrate other stuff. It's been a problem in the American public school system for a long time, and it's only recently been starting to get fixed, and kids have been getting more days off, and people are like, that's bullshit, we don't even celebrate this stuff. That's the point!
Yeah. Everybody's all up in fucking arms about Columbus Day. You know what?
Oh, Columbus Day.
I don't give a fuck about Columbus.
We'd still get that day off anyway. We talked about this on the SOS episode because that's when Leif Erikson came to America. So
there's a great anybody who hasn't seen it yet. There's a great episode of South Park this season all about the Columbus Day scandal and shit.
That's awesome.
It's fucking amazing.
Oh boy.
That's one of my two favorite episodes so far this season. It's shaping up to be a good one. We're way off topic now.
Oh, we're ranting now. We're gonna go now. So until we actually don't know what we're doing next time. I know what I want to do. We should do a science one next week, shouldn't we? It's been a long time.
Yeah, we've been rocking it with them ghosts and goblins all month.
Right.
So now it's time to sit down and talk to people about why that's all bullshit.
All right, yeah. So I guess next time I have a lot of stuff to say. So we really should do it. Yeah, we'll do a science episode. But after that, I want to go back to classic Doctor Who. Is that cool with you?
Sure, as long as we can think of something to review that I have access to.
I would like to do Power of the Daleks.
Okay, yeah, I can find that. That's good.
That is the first Patrick Troughton story. That's right after he regenerated.
Also lost for a long ass time and recently animated.
Yeah, that's the thing. So the only version that it's available in is animation. So I've seen it. I think it's absolutely worth discussing. It's actually one of my favorite classic Doctor Who Dalek stories. I have a lot of things I want to say about it. I've also just got a lot of things to say about Patrick Troughton because I've seen most of his run that isn't lost. For
those of you who don't know, unlike a lot of classic Who, it is actually available on the space satellite in space.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that after we do our science episode. and we will get into many more things after. Until then, I am Bill Worster, a.k.a. Zazubaar.
And I'm Super DM64.
Reminding you that it was a podcast. You didn't see it. Colonel Hogan, get back in your concentration camp.
Join us next October for some more spooky hijinks. Until then,
Yeah, definitely don't listen to the rest of it. Just come back next October. Thanks, D.